Chapter 3696. The Annihilation Stone. Venerable immediately felt a terrifying sense of crisis sweeping through his entire body like a tide. It was as if he was being stared at by the most dangerous, ominous beast. Originally, Yi Shiwen didn't target him, so he didn't feel that it was scary. But now, when Yi Shiwen beheaded the other two people, this scary feeling suddenly emerged. Yi Shiwen was undoubtedly at his strongest at this time. He instantly retreated millions of miles, wanting to escape, but his combat power had soared to a limit at this time. "You want to leave at this time? It's too late." Yi Shiwen's cold voice came over. The destructive stone venerate shuddered, and countless strands of stone qi spread out from his body, forming a world of stone qi that protected him. Just as he evolved the stone qi world, he saw that Yi Shiwen had already appeared in front of him. Fast, fast, fast. Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast. Almost in an instant, he had already rushed in front of the destructive Stone Elder. The Stone Qi world released by the destructive Stone Elder was destroyed by Yi Shiwen in an instant. He didn't need to use magical power to resolve it at all. Just by relying on his terrifying speed, everything could be destroyed. The speed law evolved to the extreme at this time, turning into a terrifying attack. The defense that the destructive Stone Elder had just set up was already shattered. It couldn't stop Yi Shiwen's advancement at all. In just an instant it had already collapsed. However, he was unwilling to give up like this. Countless stone qi was condensed and turned into millions of stone soldiers, rushing in the direction of the destructive Stone Elder. "Want to stop me?" 3,000 martial arts incarnations. Yi Shiwen's body swayed slightly, and directly transformed 3,000 martial arts incarnations, and then attacked in all directions. The millions of stone soldiers couldn't get close to Yi Shiwen at all. With Yi Shiwen's current means, whether it was a group battle or a one-on-one battle, there was nothing to be afraid of. The destructive Stone Elder's face changed several times in an instant. Yi Shiwen's performance was too strong, and he didn't dare to fight back. At the same time, he also knew that Yi Shiwen was so terrifying because he had entered the state of human conformity. Otherwise, there was still hope for him to protect himself. Therefore, he could only continue to avoid the fight. He didn't dare to fight directly with Yi Shiwen. And Yi Shiwen also understood this. He wouldn't let his plan succeed. The long blade formed from the Gengjin ancestral qi in his hand swept out fiercely, turning into a huge golden waterfall that slashed the sky and the earth apart, directly chopping down towards the Stone Lord of Destruction. Boom! As the waterfall slashed down, violent explosions could be heard everywhere in the world. Shock waves from the violent explosions swept out everywhere, locking onto the Annihilation Stone Venerable in an instant, making it impossible for him to escape. Then, the waterfall slashed down on the Annihilation Stone Venerable. Boundless divine radiance filled the space between the heavens and the earth, making it impossible for anyone to clearly see what exactly had been discovered. When the crowd was able to see a little more clearly, they saw that the destructive Stone Venerable did not explode as many people had imagined. On the contrary, he put his palms together and forcefully received the attack. Not only was there the laws of the way of the stone around him, but there was also another type of law that should not have appeared on him. The laws of destruction. This was a terrifying law that possessed the power of destruction. This law had been born for the sake of destruction since its inception. As long as it existed, it would be on the list of its targets to destroy. The Annihilation Stone Venerable actually possessed the laws of destruction. This was simply beyond everyone's imagination. The Stone Tool era that the Annihilation Stone Venerable lived in was purely an era of the Stone Path. All martial arts techniques and everything else were related to the Stone Path. However, the laws of destruction had appeared on his body now. This was a law that was completely different from the Stone Path laws, yet it had appeared on his body. This was a law and a trump card that he had never displayed before. At this time, everyone recalled the cold destructive intent of the Annihilation Stone Venerable's title. This was the laws of destruction. It didn't mean to destroy everything, but it meant the laws of destruction that he cultivated. For the heavenly venerables of other eras, cultivating one more law was also very magical, but it wasn't impossible. It was common knowledge that there were thousands of laws in the world. Even the performance of the same law in different eras was completely different. It was already very difficult to cultivate one law to the extreme. Cultivating several laws at the same time was undoubtedly a way of delaying oneself. Even someone as strong as Yi Shiwen, who cultivated 3,000 martial arts at the same time with the help of the mysterious space, actually only focused on some of them. The others were cultivated at the same time. It couldn't be considered as cultivating all of them at the same time. Prioritizing. It wasn't that Yi Shiwen couldn't cultivate. It was purely because he didn't have so much energy and wealth to cultivate at the same time. Even Yi Shiwen had no choice but to do so, let alone others. The Annihilation Stone Venerable, in addition to consuming too much energy and possibly conflicting with the Great Path that he cultivated at the same time, was most importantly an era that purely cultivated the Stone Path. This was far inferior to the Martial Path era, which was an era where complex laws existed at the same time. Therefore, no one expected that the Annihilation Stone Venerable actually had such a trick up his sleeve. No one had expected it to be able to block Yi Shiwen's attack. Even Yi Shiwen hadn't expected the Annihilation Stone Venerable to have such an ability. The laws of destruction are profound. They aren't inferior to the Stone Path laws at all. Yi Shiwen withdrew the Gungjin ancestral qi and said faintly, "It was normal for a celestial master to cultivate several laws at the same time. However, it was very rare for two laws to be cultivated to the extreme. In other words, it was simply impossible." Yi Shiwen had separated the cultivation of Sword Dao from his own martial Dao, and had transformed it into a martial Dao incarnation. However, the cultivation of Venerable Sword and Venerable Yi Shiwen were worlds apart. In fact, they weren't even on the same level. The Annihilation Stone Venerable finally breathed a sigh of relief after dodging this fatal blow. He said, "This secret of mine has never been exposed. I didn't expect you to force me to this point. I'm actually not a creature of the Stone Age. Instead, I'm a willpower born from the laws of destruction. Later, I reincarnated into the Stone Age by chance. Finally, I have the cultivation I have today. No one has ever forced me to this point. You are the first." The Annihilation Stone Venerable's laws of destruction began to emerge and completely integrated with his Stone Path laws. Obviously, this wasn't the first time he had done this. After the two laws were integrated together, his strength had increased a lot. Obviously, this was his trump card. Among these peak celestial masters, the Annihilation Stone Venerable, who wasn't considered too outstanding, was the strongest. "You have forced me to this point. Only death awaits you. I don't even need to make a move. As long as the time is up, you will die." The Annihilation Stone Venerable crossed his arms and looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. He had absolute confidence that he could exhaust Yi Shiwen to death. He might not be Yi Shiwen's opponent in this state, but he was confident that he could protect himself. As long as he could protect himself, he didn't necessarily have to die. "I'm surprised that you have such a trump card. However, if you think that you can drag me to death like this, then you are gravely mistaken," Yi Shiwen sneered. Then, he took a step forward and instantly rushed in front of the Annihilation Stone Venerable. The Martial Venerable seal suddenly flew out of his head. The big hand holding the Martial Venerable seal seemed to expand against the wind. It grew bigger and bigger, and then smashed towards the Annihilation Stone Venerable. Rumble! Wherever the Martial Venerable seal passed, the entire world was torn apart. The terrifying scene of atoms being blown to pieces could be seen everywhere. After the Annihilation Stone Venerable had improved his cultivation, Yi Shiwen's attacks had also become more targeted. They had become even more terrifying. A blood-red color appeared on his body. That was the scene of all the blood vessels in his body exploding. Previously, Yi Shiwen had been suppressing the supreme ancestral symbol's energy in his body. That was because the eruption of the supreme ancestral symbol's energy wasn't a good thing for him. However, now that the Annihilation Stone Venerable's strength had improved after integrating with the Annihilation Law, he couldn't hold back anymore. What? He's still hiding his strength? A celestial master exclaimed. This was because Yi Shiwen hadn't reached his limit yet. How much more could he break through when he was in the state of Human One unification? This was simply unbelievable. The Annihilation Stone Venerable also opened his eyes wide. He didn't expect that Yi Shiwen still had such an ability and was hiding such strength. Almost instantly, Yi Shiwen's attack had already arrived in front of the Annihilation Stone Venerable. The martial Venerable Seal was like a Taiwei sacred mountain that was about to suppress him. The Annihilation Stone Venerable struggled desperately. He wanted to break the suppression of the martial Venerable Seal. However, he couldn't do anything. In that instant, he was overwhelmed by Yi Shiwen's aura. He couldn't resist at all. Boom! The Annihilation Stone Venerable was directly hit. Whether it was the Annihilation Law or the Stone Dao Law, it couldn't stop Yi Shiwen's footstep. It couldn't even resist a little. It was directly destroyed by Yi Shiwen with lightning speed. Then, the martial Venerable Seal fell on the Annihilation Stone Venerable's body. The Annihilation Stone Venerable had already reached the peak of body cultivation. However, he was still blasted into pieces after being hit by the martial Venerable Seal. The spirit hidden within was also completely destroyed by Yi Shiwen's blade. Chapter 3697. After killing the destructive Stone Lord, everyone's eyes fell on Crimson Serpent Demon. Out of the 5 heavenly venerables that besieged Yi Shiwen, only Crimson Serpent Demon was left. The pressure on Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable had increased a lot. It could be said that there were 5 of them against Yi Shiwen and Heaven Talisman Immortal at the beginning. But now it had become 1 against 2. This kind of one-sided pressure instantly increased to the limit. Crimson Serpent Demon finally reacted to being surrounded by Yi Shiwen and Heaven Talisman Immortal. He had already reacted, but there was no way to escape. Heaven Talisman Immortal had already taken the initiative to block all his escape route. Originally, he came to restrain Heaven Talisman Immortal. But now, the situation was completely reversed. He was being restrained by Heaven Talisman Immortal. At this moment, he couldn't escape even if he wanted to. Yi Shiwen also turned his eyes to Crimson Serpent Demon. His injuries had worsened further. Killing the destructive Stone Lord had worsened his injuries. Fortunately, so far it was still within his control. After his cultivation advanced to the peak of the 8th realm, all aspects of his abilities had improved significantly. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Lord instantly erupted. His entire body ignited with blood-colored magic power. The blazing radiance filled up the entire era. It was as if he had turned into a blood-colored frenzy as he fled into the distance. "You're only trying to escape now," Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable shouted. She was already prepared. Countless law talismans erupted in an instant, turning into law chains that formed a huge net of law chains that trapped Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable within. Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable's movement was stopped and his speed was directly slowed down. However, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable had underestimated Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable's determination to escape. After being left alone, he quickly understood his situation. If he couldn't escape, the outcome that awaited him wouldn't be any better than others. Heaven Talisman Immortal's giant net formed by the law of talismans couldn't stop him. He directly broke through the net and escaped. However, Yi Shiwen had already arrived in the split second when he was being delayed. Emperor trampling the world, Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. Then, his foot ferociously stomped down like a huge mountain. His target was right in front of the Scarlet Serpent Demon Elder. Boom! Yi Shiwen's big foot trampled a huge hole in the intersection of this era. Endless chaos rushed out of it. It was trampled out by Yi Shiwen. The Crimson Serpent Demon Venerable stopped in his tracks in front of this incomparably huge hole. He looked at the huge hole with a gloomy expression. If he had reacted just a little slower, he would have been stepped on. If that had happened, the consequences would have been unimaginable. And this was merely a casual step of Yi Shiwen's. However, it was already no less than a full-strength strike from Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't know when this person, who he had never taken seriously, had grown to such an extent. From being able to kill him casually to being able to kill him now. Behind him, Yi Shiwen walked step by step. He seemed slow but was actually fast. In an instant, he had already traveled through time and space. He arrived in front of the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder and looked at him coldly. The killing intent in Yi Shiwen's eyes was boiling and overflowing. Previously, when he and the Moon City Lord were both injured, the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder had almost caught up and killed him. Now, the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder and the Moon City Lord had found people to besiege him. It could even be said that if it wasn't for his good luck, he would have died in the hands of the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. Such a trusted enemy was also a peak heavenly master in the demon era. One could imagine the killing intent in the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder's heart. Now that the Moon City Lord had been killed, only the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder was left. Marshal Venerable, how dare you kill him? Demon Venerable Luo Ho's roar came from afar. Although he was far away, the Demon Venerable Luo Ho still managed to find a way to find out about the situation here. Things that were originally in the bag turned out to be like this. No one could have imagined that Yi Shiwen would obtain the final victory. Not only did he win, but he even killed the other heavenly masters, leaving only the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. The Demon Venerable Luo Ho's voice was full of threats. However, Yi Shiwen only sneered and ignored him. He looked at the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder and said with a faint smile, "Why? Do you think you can escape?" Soon, the Middle Heavenly Master's voice came from afar. "Demon Venerable Luoho, if you want to return, you have to ask me if I'm willing." Then, another shocking battle ensued. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder's eyes were cold. He just looked at Yi Shiwen. His eyes seemed to be able to freeze everything. At this moment, he also understood that it was impossible for him to escape from Yi Shiwen. In the distance, the Demon Venerable Luoho was also held up by the Middle Heavenly Master. It was impossible for him to help him. In that case, he could only fight with Yi Shiwen. If that's the case, then let's fight. At this moment, the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder still displayed his demeanor as the supreme of the demon era. He didn't just blindly escape. In a situation where he couldn't avoid, he still displayed the demeanor of fighting to the death in the past. "Very well, you are qualified to be killed by me like this." The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder was ferocious, but Yi Shiwen was obviously even more ferocious. Facing the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder, Yi Shiwen didn't have the slightest bit of mercy. Boom! The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder didn't say much. His opponent grabbed towards the void. It was almost as if he had the power to pick up mountains and rivers. The chaos was torn apart, and a divine mountain was pulled out from it. Using the divine mountain as a weapon, he smashed it towards Yi Shiwen. At this moment, the aura of heaven and earth was in disorder. The entire era was trembling. Countless divine lights were blazing, and magic was rampaging. "Come on." Yi Shiwen didn't retreat at all. He took a step forward like a rising dragon and descending phoenix. He directly rushed towards the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. In the endless divine brilliance, he twisted his body and flew up into the sky. He kicked out in the sky. It was domineering and unstoppable. Bang! A loud explosion was heard as Yi Shiwen's foot landed on the top of the Divine Mountain. Suddenly, the entire Divine Mountain was kicked into powder by Yi Shiwen. At this moment, a blood-red long whip appeared in the hand of the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. It was like a blood-red demonic dragon. It opened its bloody mouth and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. He used his extreme strength for such an opportunity. He wanted to create such an opportunity. Yi Shiwen held the gung metal long blade in his hand and suddenly burst out. The long blade fought against the blood-red long whip. Clang! A loud roar was accompanied by a burst of flesh and blood. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder retreated repeatedly. The muscles of his entire arm had burst open. His expression was incomparably dignified. Although he had already guessed Yi Shiwen's strength, he couldn't truly understand how terrifying Yi Shiwen had become if he didn't personally participate in the battle. Most importantly, Yi Shiwen's cultivation in the path of physique cultivation had reached the pinnacle. Even the destructive stone Venerable and the physique Venerable suffered a great loss when they fought against Yi Shiwen in this aspect, let alone the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. He was surprised, but at the same time, these were all within his expectations. After gaining the upper hand in one move, Yi Shiwen didn't give the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder a chance to breathe. He held the gung metal long blade in his hand and instantly launched a crazy attack on the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. This series of attacks was like a storm. It was so oppressive that it made people feel suffocated. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder also did his best to resist desperately. At this moment, he was forced into a desperate situation by Yi Shiwen. He didn't hide anything and attacked crazily. On the side, the Heavenly Talisman Immortal Venerable didn't make a move. Although she hated the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder to the bone, she also knew that her strength was actually on par with the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. If she attacked, it was hard to say whether she could defeat the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. Therefore, she only watched and didn't make a move. She was guarding against the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder escaping and others joining the battle. Although she didn't have an overwhelming advantage over other peak Heavenly Venerables, she was more than enough to deter those Heavenly Venerables who wanted to take advantage of the situation. After all, she was also a peak Great Heavenly Venerable. She was an outstanding person and a pillar in countless ancient eras. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder waved the blood-colored long whip. Countless demonic patterns emerged, forming one array after another to enhance the power of his long whip. This was the power of a Heavenly Venerable Dao tool. Even Dao tools couldn't achieve this level. It was really terrifying to the extreme. But even so, he was helpless in the face of Yi Shiwen. The big handprint that Yi Shiwen casually suppressed contained thousands of terrifying law talismans. It had unimaginable power. It could easily break his offensive and law talismans. Although the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder tried his best to resist, the combat power of both sides was obviously a level apart. Under such circumstances, even if he tried his best, he could only fight and retreat. He was not a match for Yi Shiwen at all. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder was retreating step by step. His body kept exploding and turning into masses of blood mist. Bang! Finally, after the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder resisted Yi Shiwen's giant handprint, his body exploded on the spot. Even his spirit was severely injured. How could Yi Shiwen let go of such a good opportunity? The gung metal blade in his hand instantly attacked and killed the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder with one slash. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder only let out a scream before he died in Yi Shiwen's hands. At this moment, a figure swept over from afar with a great momentum. Who else could it be if not Demon Venerable Luoho? At this moment, Demon Venerable Luoho stared at Yi Shiwen and said, "You actually dared to kill him." Chapter 3698. Demon Venerable Luohu exuded a terrifying aura. It was extremely dangerous, causing the entire era to tremble along with his rapid breathing. Many celestial venerables who were watching could sense an extremely dangerous aura from Demon Venerable Luohu. The entire era was in a state of extreme danger because of his anger. This made many people feel it in their hearts. Demon Venerable Luohu's killing intent wasn't concealed at all. Demon Venerable Luohu had said that this battle was the idea of the City Lord of Moon City and Demon Venerable Scarlet Serpent. However, it was absolutely impossible for someone like Demon Venerable Luohu to gather so many peak heavenly venerables. Yi Shiwen had killed Demon Venerable Luohu's incarnation, but that was a small matter. It was just an incarnation. Killing it was nothing. There was no need to risk his life to kill such a powerful heavenly venerable, because the price he had to pay was too high. Otherwise, shouldn't the first target be the middle heavenly venerable, the Fortune God Dynasty's deputy emperor? Logically, the Ancient Era and the Fortune God Dynasty were mortal enemies. The middle heavenly venerable was the deputy emperor of the Fortune God Dynasty. He was the Fortune God Dynasty's deputy emperor of the same age, and was the supreme ruler of the Fortune world. Logically speaking, if he appeared in this place filled with Ancient Era's experts, he should be quickly surrounded and killed. However, there weren't many people who were willing to make a move. That was a peak heavenly venerable. How much price would they have to pay to surround and kill him? No one was willing to pay such a price and be taken advantage of by others. Moreover, if they really angered the Fortune God Dynasty, even if they couldn't destroy all of the ancient eras, destroying one of them wouldn't be a problem. Who would dare to stand out at this time? These people had their own selfish motives and weren't willing to join forces. However, Demon Venerable Luohu had seen through them. Yi Shiwen's threat was too great. In time to come, there would be another middle heavenly venerable. Even if he wasn't a middle heavenly venerable, he would at least be able to solidify the title of Eastern Heavenly Venerable. The Fortune God Dynasty would have another peak expert. This was the reason why he had gathered so many peak Empyreans. At his current level, it could be said that he was only half a step away from reaching that realm. His focus wasn't just on treasures, but on the development of the demonic path era. Clearly, in this epoch, before the Great Apocalypse, the martial epoch and their ancient epoch had been in a constant state of decline. If the martial epoch was stronger, then the ancient epoch, including the demonic epoch, would be weaker. However, he never expected that Yi Shiwen would not only pose a threat to them in the future, but he had already posed a threat now. The fall of 5 peak celestial masters could be easily guessed. This would involve the turmoil of several eras. These were things that he hadn't thought of when he made this plan. Yi Shiwen's growth rate was far beyond his imagination. Even if he felt that he had overestimated Yi Shiwen and found several peak celestial masters, he still failed in the end. Most importantly, the death of the other peak heavenly venerables was one thing, but the death of the Scarlet Serpent Archdevil was the true loss of the Devil Path epoch. The Devil Path epoch hadn't suffered such a huge loss even when they had seized the Moon City from the Fortune Divine Dynasty and organized the Battle of Moon City. Now they had suffered losses because of Yi Shiwen. Not only did the Scarlet Serpent Archdevil lose, but also the Moon City City Lord, the newly promoted peak heavenly venerables. All of them had died here. He couldn't help but feel like his heart was dripping blood. He didn't even know how many of such experts there were in the demonic path epoch. Yet they had all died here. There wasn't any large-scale operation, and they had died in such a meaningless manner. Yet the target they had besieged, Yi Shiwen, was fine. The Scarlet Serpent Archdevil wanted to vomit blood just thinking about it. This was the Devil Path epoch, an era with a deep foundation. If it had been an ordinary era, losing a peak heavenly venerate might not have such a powerful figure to oversee it. So what if I killed them? Yi Shiwen looked coldly at Demon Venerable Luohu. In fact, Demon Venerable Luohu was very strong, but he was completely different from back then. Back then, just to kill an incarnation of Demon Venerable Luohu, he had already done his best. Now, he was fearless even when facing Demon Venerable Luoho. "Then I'll kill you." Demon Venerable Luoho's eyes emitted an extremely dangerous aura, and he was about to attack. In the distance, the figure of the Middle Heavenly Venerable was getting closer and closer. In just a moment, he had already reached Yi Shiwen's side. However, he didn't look very good, and he even looked a little embarrassed. Clearly, he had suffered some losses when fighting with Demon Venerable Luoho just now. That was why Demon Venerable Luoho had broken away to find trouble with Yi Shiwen. For a top expert like him, this was simply a great shame. Demon Venerable Luoho had paid a huge price to break away. "Kill him? Did you ask me?" said the Middle Heavenly Venerable. "Kill me. Right now, Demon Venerable Luoho probably doesn't know what kind of situation he is in." Yi Shiwen sneered and said, "Does he still think he can completely defeat us now? Right now we should be discussing whether we should kill him or not." As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, Demon Venerable Luoho suddenly realized that he was already surrounded by Yi Shiwen, the Middle Heavenly Venerable, and the Heaven Talisman Immortal. Especially the Heaven Talisman Immortal. He didn't know when he had blocked his escape route. The three of them formed a triangular formation and surrounded him. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. He finally realized how dangerous the situation he was in right now was. It should be known that among the three of them, none of them were ordinary people. The strongest among them was the Middle Heavenly Venerable, who was already not inferior to him. The Heaven Talisman Immortal was also a genuine peak Heavenly Venerable. Even if Yi Shiwen had withdrawn from the state of human convergence, his combat power was still at the level of a peak Heavenly Venerable. The three experts surrounded him. At this moment, he understood the situation when Yi Shiwen was surrounded, and what kind of mood he was in. "That's right, ha ha. He still doesn't know what kind of situation he is in." The Middle Heavenly Venerable laughed loudly. The three of them almost didn't need to communicate. They quietly surrounded Demon Venerable Luoho. "Middle Heavenly Venerable, you dare to kill me?" Demon Venerable Luoho sneered and said, "Can you stop me if I want to leave?" "Cut the crap. You will know if I can stop you or not," Yi Shiwen said. At this moment, his skin began to crack, and the dense cracks began to get bigger and bigger. He had killed so many experts in a row. Even if he didn't delay much time and tried to save as much time as possible, it still took a lot of time. At this moment, he was almost at his limit. There wasn't much time left. After a while, he could only withdraw from the state of human convergence. He could only kill Demon Venerable Luoho during this period of time. Boom! Yi Shiwen's body instantly erupted with terrifying magical power. Endless power erupted in an instant. Countless talisman puppets transformed into a terrifying energy tide, and directly swept towards Demon Venerable Luoho. Demon Venerable Luoho couldn't help but look a little solemn in the face of this terrifying energy tide that swept towards Yi Shiwen. A demonic saber appeared in his hand. Countless magic condensed around the demonic saber, and directly slashed towards Yi Shiwen's energy tide. The demonic saber easily slashed the sweeping talisman energy tide into nothingness. Yi Shiwen's eyes narrowed slightly. This casual slash could reflect the difference between Demon Venerable Luoho and other peak Heavenly Venerables. If it was Qi Lian Demon Venerable and the others, they would have to use all their strength to block it. However, Demon Venerable Luoho blocked it with just a casual slash. His skills were clearly more tyrannical than Qi Lian Demon Venerable. He was a true invincible expert among Heavenly Venerables. Unless it was an old monster of half-step sovereign, otherwise, no one could pose a huge threat to an expert of this level. On the other side, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable had already launched an attack. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she pinched a seal. An incomparably huge talisman appeared in front of her. Then, a pen appeared in her hand, and she began to write a huge suppress character on it. This talisman grew bigger and bigger, almost expanding in the wind. It turned into a huge cage and suppressed demon Venerable Luoho. Humph, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable, so many years have passed. You haven't made much progress, but I'm completely different from before. Demon Venerable Luoho sneered and unscrupulously attacked Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. After the long saber in his hand slashed through Yi Shiwen's energy tide, it almost instantly slashed towards Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable in the opposite direction. The huge talisman cage was completely destroyed by this slash. In just a moment it was completely slashed in half. This slash was casual and didn't carry a trace of smoke or fire. It didn't seem like an ordinary blade technique. It was a true technique that was close to the path. In this aspect, Demon Venerable Luoho had really reached the extreme. Humph! Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable snorted coldly and didn't say anything. In front of her, thousands of talismans were completely formed, and all of them turned into a terrifying attack that swept towards Demon Venerable Luoho. Every talisman had a huge Tao character written on it. The Tao character was the manifestation of the power of the Great Path. Every Tao character contained terrifying power, and now it was completely swept away. Demon Venerable Luoho also slashed with his saber, splitting into countless saber shadows that went against every Tao character. Demon Venerable Luoho, take this! Middle Heavenly Venerable also joined the battle. He instantly rushed in front of Demon Venerable Luoho and manifested the law of time, boosting his speed to the limit and turning it into a terrifying attack. Chapter 3699. Three Supremes besieged Demon Venerate Luoho. One could imagine how earth-shattering this scene was. The entire era began to rumble, and even faintly showed signs of collapsing. It was impossible for several peak heavenly venerates to destroy an era that was still alive. However, there was simply no way to compare an era that was still alive with an era that had already perished. Unable to withstand the continuous attacks of so many peak heavenly venerates, this place was on the verge of collapsing. However, every time this happened, there would be an inexplicable power in this era that would maintain this collapsing trend and restore it. Everyone present was a heavenly venerate, so they could naturally sense that there was a nomological power repairing the collapsing era. Based on the situation of this nomological power, it was not difficult for them to guess that it was related to Saint Absolute Sky. The earth-shattering battle between the three broke out, and Demon Venerable Luoho was also suppressed by the attacks of the three. However, the three of them couldn't injure Demon Venerable Luoho completely. They could only suppress Demon Venerable Luoho completely. The strength of a middle heavenly venerable was naturally invincible. His figure appeared in every corner, and his speed was also extremely fast. He was really carefree. He also had all kinds of attack techniques at his fingertips. Although he mainly cultivated the speed law and even advanced to the time law, it didn't mean that he didn't know anything about other laws. In fact, he even had a deep understanding of other laws. He also had all kinds of martial arts and supernatural powers at his fingertips, and all of them were very powerful. Heaven Talisman Immortal's understanding of the Talisman Tao had also reached great heights. In the current era, even the Talisman Tao era had been destroyed. Apart from the legendary Talisman Ancestor, she was the #1 person in the Talisman Tao. In terms of understanding of the Great Tao, she wasn't inferior to Demon Venerable Luoho. The only difference was in terms of skills. Yi Shiwen also unknowingly withdrew from the state of human convergence. Otherwise, the three of them could really injure Demon Venerable Luoho if they joined forces. However, they would also have to pay a huge price. After all, such a battle would also have a very serious backlash on his body. This was the power of the supreme ancestral symbol. Although it seemed very strong, it wasn't his own power after all. This made Yi Shiwen even more eager to improve his strength. If he could improve further, he would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Middle Heavenly Masters, and even surpass them. If this kind of battle continued, it might take hundreds or even thousands of years before a victor could be determined. This was the norm, unless one side had an absolute advantage. However, whether it was Yi Shiwen, Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal, or the Middle Heavenly Venerable, all of them were very patient. However, the Devil Path era wasn't going to be easy to deal with. It was likely that some experts would arrive soon. They wouldn't allow Demon Venerable Luo Ho to perish in the hands of Yi Shiwen and the others. Yi Shiwen had already killed Demon Venerable Qi Lian. So, how could he allow Demon Venerable Luo Ho, the leader of the Devil era, to perish here? Archdevil Ancestor Rahu's status in the Devil Path era was similar to the Middle Heavenly Venerate's status in the Fortune Divine Dynasty. No matter how many Heavenly Venerates fought with the Middle Heavenly Venerates, they would spontaneously protect the Middle Heavenly Venerate at this time. It was precisely because he knew this that Demon Venerable Luo Ho was particularly confident. Even if he went all out, the Middle Heavenly Venerate and the others wouldn't be able to kill him. However, he was currently in a very difficult situation. He was constantly at a disadvantage under the joint attack of the three. The three of them were extremely powerful in their own domains. Among them, the one who caused him the most trouble was the elusive Middle Heavenly Venerate. However, the one who posed the real threat was Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's rampage was incomparably tyrannical. Although it wasn't enough to seriously injure him, it was still very uncomfortable. Violent spiritual power poured into his body. It was fine if it was one-on-one. As long as he dealt with it carefully, it wouldn't pose a fatal threat to him. However, with the cooperation of the other two, Yi Shiwen's offensive was magnified to the maximum. In particular, the seventh metal ancestral qi in his hand could injure him. If he wasn't careful, he would be seriously injured. Finally, both sides fought for an unknown amount of time. When the spectating Heavenly Venerates were scared witless, Yi Shiwen finally found a breakthrough. He slashed Demon Venerable Luo Ho with the seventh metal ancestral qi. He truly broke Demon Venerable Luo Ho's defense and slashed a huge crack on his body. Blood splashed out. This was the first time that Yi Shiwen was able to injure Demon Venerable Luo Ho. No matter how he attacked before, he couldn't injure Demon Venerable Luo Ho with his cultivation. Demon Venerable Luo Ho's eyes widened. He couldn't believe that he was actually injured by Yi Shiwen. No matter how many reasons he gave, Yi Shiwen had the help of the other two. However, there was one thing that he couldn't deny. That was that Yi Shiwen's realm was far inferior to his. Yi Shiwen was only at the peak of the 8th realm. Demon Venerable Luo Ho had long surpassed the peak of the 9th realm. Between Heavenly Venerates, the difference of one realm was often like the difference between heaven and earth. Even so, Yi Shiwen still injured him. How could he not be shocked by such an ability? Good, let's take him down in one go. The Middle Heavenly Venerable laughed when he saw this. The speed law around him boiled and turned into a terrifying attack that swept towards Demon Venerable Luo Ho like a tidal wave. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable wouldn't let go of such an opportunity. He simply wouldn't give his mortal enemy any chance to breathe. Damn it! Demon Venerable Luo Ho retreated continuously. He was in an even more sorry state. The injury this time was completely beyond his expectations. He didn't expect to be seriously injured. Although he was besieged, he was confident that he could protect himself for a short period of time. He could hold on until the other experts of the Demon Dao era arrived. It was just like how Yi Shiwen was besieged previously. However, in reality that was nothing. However, the other three wouldn't give him any chance to escape. They still formed a triangle and surrounded him. Every one of them was an expert. None of them could be considered a weakness, especially when he was injured. However, at this moment the entire era began to shake. The entire space was shaking. All the Heavenly Venerables felt this sudden change. Even the 3 people besieging Demon Venerable Luo Ho were forced to stop. This finally gave Demon Venerable Luo Ho a chance to breathe. He used this opportunity to cleanse the Gung Metal Ancestral Qi that Yi Shiwen had blasted into his body. The Gung Metal Ancestral Qi was too overbearing. Even with his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to cleanse it in a short period of time if he didn't use all his strength. Because of this, he was at a complete disadvantage. Not being able to cleanse the Gung Metal Ancestral Qi was a huge hidden danger. He could die without a burial place at any time. When he cleansed the Gung Metal Ancestral Qi, he looked up and was instantly shocked. The layers of space in the distance began to ripple like the surface of water. Endless divine radiance was emitted from the center of the ripples. At the center of the boundless divine radiance, an incomparably huge graveyard slowly appeared, and its appearance caused the entire graveyard to shake violently. It should be said that this era's graveyard was originally created to cover the traces of this graveyard. Now that this graveyard had suddenly appeared, it caused the formations and boundaries covering the era's graveyard to produce strong fluctuations. They were trying to resist the pull of some kind of power. Everyone could see that the power of countless principles was slowly pulling this graveyard out of the void under the control of a mysterious power. "This is the grave of Sage Absolute Heaven," Yi Shiwen murmured to himself and said. It wasn't difficult to guess that such a huge graveyard, which was equivalent to an entire world, would appear in this era's graveyard. It could only be Sage Absolute Heaven's graveyard. Yi Shiwen looked at the formations and boundaries that emerged. They were very profound. They even reached a realm that Yi Shiwen hadn't touched yet. It should be known that with his current cultivation, he could even see through the formations and boundaries laid down by peak heavenly venerables and understand the operating principles. However, he couldn't understand them now. There was only one possibility. It was laid down by a dominator-level expert. Middle heavenly venerables and heaven talisman immortal venerables also looked at this shocking scene. They had the same guess. Only the appearance of Sage Absolute Heaven's graveyard could make them temporarily give up the opportunity to besiege Demon Venerable's Luoho. Because they knew that it was not possible to kill Demon Venerable's Luoho in a short time unless Yi Shiwen could maintain the state of human one for a long time. However, after a series of battles, Yi Shiwen had also reached his limit. "Those old fellows actually succeeded," Demon Venerable's Luoho muttered to himself. Even he was very shocked. Of course, he also knew about those old fellows besieging the martial epoch's heavenly law. This matter wasn't a secret. After all, who could hide it from them? This matter even involved an old fellow from their demon epoch. Naturally, he knew the inside story. However, he didn't think much of it. It was impossible to besiege and kill the heavenly law. "Are you crazy? You're thinking too much." This was what he thought in his heart. Even with his cultivation, he felt that it was impossible to achieve such a mythical thing. It was completely unbelievable. Therefore, he only came to help because he couldn't refuse that old fellow. A dying person could do anything. It wasn't strange for them to do anything in order to survive. He didn't want to take it lightly. The real reason was that he wanted to see if it was possible. Anyone who hadn't reached that step and hadn't attained true immortality would face this scene sooner or later. However, he never expected that those old fellows actually managed to do it by gathering everyone's strength. Chapter 3700. What method did those old fellows use? I nearly overturned the entire epic graveyard in the past few days, but I couldn't find anything. How did they do it? Demon Venerate Luoho opened his eyes wide. Luoho found it incredible as well, and he even felt somewhat excited. Could it be that those old fellows' idea was not just wishful thinking, and it was actually possible to realize it? If that was the case, then it would undoubtedly be a beacon of light for those who came later, guiding them further down the path. Even if the martial epoch was gone, they would still have a chance in the next epoch. Of course, the prerequisite was that they could become half-step sovereigns before the next epoch and stand on equal footing with those old fellows. However, Demon Venerate Luoho was still confident. After all, he was only a step away from it. Everyone turned their gazes towards the sky. There was an incomparably huge tomb that was the size of an entire world. Looking at it was incomparably shocking. However, this tomb was actually pulled out by an invisible force. Clearly, this wasn't the time for it to come out into the world. Yet, it was forcefully brought out into the world. Many heavenly venerates reacted quickly and knew what it was. In just a moment, many strong heavenly venerates flew out from the layers of space and rushed towards the colossal graveyard. Although there were only a few experts from a few epochs who truly wanted to obtain the so-called inheritance left behind by Sage Absolute Heaven, which contained a method to kill the heavenly Tao, it was mainly because there were such old monsters in those epochs that forced them to come and serve them. However, the others did not think so. Clearly, the few epochs had already fallen into a frenzy. Anyone who stood in their way at this time would undoubtedly be seeking death. Who could contend with such a force? Furthermore, many people wanted to learn this method. Although not everyone was like those old monsters, on the verge of death and reaching the end of their lifespans, everyone would have such a day. If they could learn it in advance, they could plan for many things. Furthermore, if they succeeded and caused the martial epoch to collapse, they would also be able to get a share of the epoch's end feast. Therefore, from this aspect, these heavenly venerables were also in the same camp as those old fellows. The only people who truly did not want them to succeed were the experts of the martial epoch. The martial epoch was the foundation of their survival. If it was destroyed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even if the martial epoch ended, now would not be the time for them. Yi Shiwen looked at Middle Heavenly Venerable and Senior Heavenly Talisman. The three of them looked at each other and said, "Attack. We must not let them discover us first." The three of them made a decision almost immediately. Instead of continuing to beat up Demon Lord Luoho, it was more important for them to find the trick that Sage Absolute Heaven had mentioned. The three of them immediately flew in the direction of Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb. Seeing that the three of them had finally left, Demon Lord Rahu finally heaved a sigh of relief. Even though he had expected this to happen, he was only truly safe after the three of them left. This time, it was extremely dangerous for him. He had never thought that he would almost die here. He had almost accidentally fallen into the encirclement of the three people. If ordinary heavenly venerables dared to encircle him, they would be courting death. However, these three were different. If they fought for a long time, they might even be able to kill him. Damn Martial Venerable, Middle Heavenly Venerable, and Senior Heavenly Talisman. I will repay this debt tenfold in the future, Demon Lord Rahu said through gritted teeth. However, he did not slow down and immediately chased after them. This time, the demonic epoch was determined to obtain the item left in the tomb. Yi Shiwen, Middle Heavenly Venerable, and Senior Heavenly Talisman moved very quickly. They could cross an ordinary world with one step. However, the strange thing was that no matter how they walked, they did not feel that they were getting closer to Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb. This was not only the case for Yi Shiwen and the other two. Even the Heavenly Venerables who arrived earlier and Demon Lord Rahu and the others who arrived later were the same. They seemed to be lingering within a certain distance. After escaping from the encirclement of Yi Shiwen and the other two, Demon Lord Rahu had already gathered a group of experts. They were the experts of the demonic epoch. More than 20 Heavenly Venerables were behind him. There was even a peak Heavenly Venerable expert among them. The demonic epoch did indeed have incredibly deep accumulations. Although it could not compare to the martial epoch, it far surpassed the other epoch. If a regular epoch suffered such a heavy blow, it would have collapsed long ago. However, while this was painful for the demonic epoch, it had not reached the stage where it would truly be a crippling blow. Yi Shiwen looked around. Most of the celestial venerables present were in groups of 3 to 5. Many celestial venerables from different eras had joined hands to form small teams to attack. They were obviously very experienced and wouldn't be left alone. If they were left alone, the consequences would be unimaginable. In addition to these small groups of heavenly venerables, there were also 2 equally large groups of great epics besides the demonic epic. In one of these groups, the area where the heavenly venerables were located would turn into a ghost domain. Although the aura of these heavenly venerables was upright, without the aura of a ghost domain, Yi Shiwen could recognize them at a glance. These were the heavenly venerables of the ghost epoch. Among the countless epochs, the ghost epoch was also a very powerful one. It was only slightly inferior to the demonic epoch. This was an epoch that once dominated the world. The birth of this epoch was very strange. It was different from ordinary epochs that took a long time to reopen the world and evolve into an epoch. The ghost epoch was born almost immediately after the Great Destruction epoch. The living beings of that epoch had all turned into sentient lifeforms of the ghost epoch. After those powerhouses died, they turned into sentient lifeforms that were very powerful. Many of them retained their previous memories. When they cultivated, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Therefore, the ghost epoch quickly developed from the corpses of that epoch and developed into an incomparably powerful epoch. What was even more terrifying was that the cultivation method of this ghost epoch was very strange. It evolved after the living beings died. Therefore, they could absorb the dead powerhouses of other epochs to join them. When this ghost epoch was still in existence, it was hard to find an opponent in the world. It didn't even defend itself. It constantly attacked other opportunities and plundered powerhouses to transform into ghost Dao powerhouses. Later, this epoch finally waited for the Great Destruction. It was destroyed by many ancient epochs, severely damaging its foundation and vitality. It was no longer as tyrannical as before. Even so, the ghost epoch was still one of the strongest epochs among the many epochs. It was second only to the devil epoch. But in the recent Great Destruction, they were suppressed. When the Fortune Heavenly Monarch was still in power, the ghost epoch was very active in attacking the Fortune God dynasty. However, they were also severely injured by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. It had been a long time since they appeared again. Yi Shiwen didn't expect that they would appear this time. There were also more than 20 powerful heavenly venerables. They were led by a man and a woman, 2 peak heavenly venerables. Just by standing there, they seemed to be able to turn the endless vault of heaven into their own ghost domain. Countless Een spirits were chanting ancient scriptures, transforming everything in the world into the ghost Tao. This was also the root cause of their incomparable fear for countless epochs. In addition to the devil epoch and the ghost epoch, Yi Shiwen also saw a group of very powerful people. These people were surrounded by magical powers. Yes, these magical powers were actually materialized. They had cultivated their magical powers to materialize, somewhat like Yi Shiwen's 3000 martial Tao. Magical powers epoch. Yi Shiwen thought for a while and found the records about these powerhouses in the countless records of the Fortune God dynasty. This was another extremely powerful epoch. The cultivation path of this epoch was magical powers. Moreover, it wasn't ordinary creatures that achieved Tao. It was simply the various creatures that evolved from the 3000 magical powers that emerged when the world was created. This epoch was also extremely prosperous. The great Tao of magical powers was also popular. In the mythological era of the martial epoch, the great Tao of magical powers was also popular. Countless sentient creatures relied on magical powers to run amok for a time. Later on, they were replaced by foreign creatures. Later on, it was the rise of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. At that time, the martial Tao was truly established as the mainstream of cultivation. Just now, there were already 3 powerful epochs participating in the fight for Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb. This time, the fight was bound to be extremely tragic. These epochs were each more powerful than the last. Moreover, there were many peak heavenly venerables among them. Moreover, there were also a large number of ordinary heavenly venerables. When the number reached such a level, it would be a certain threat to experts like them. In addition to those idle heavenly venerables, this operation to fight for Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb had been extremely difficult from the beginning. It was imaginable that they would have to go through great battles, even bloody battles, before it could be possible. Everyone looked at them. After all, everyone knew that this search for Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb was, to put it bluntly, targeting the Fortune God dynasty. They wanted to kill the Fortune God dynasty's heavenly Tao. It would be impossible for the Fortune God dynasty to not have any reaction at all. However, after waiting for a while, the Fortune God dynasty's reinforcements finally arrived. The person leading them was none other than the West Heavenly Venerate. He looked travel-worn and had clearly just arrived. Chapter 3701. With the arrival of a group of experts led by West Tianzuan, the four major forces that came to fight for Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb had also arrived. From afar, the Fortune God dynasty's force was the largest. The other forces had at most 2 peak heavenly venerables, but the Fortune God dynasty had Heaven Talisman Immortal, Middle Tianzuan, West Tianzuan, and East Tianzuan Yishiwan. The 4 peak heavenly venerables were the strongest. In addition, West Tianzuan also brought 2 ninth realm heavenly venerables, who were only slightly weaker than the peak heavenly venerables. The rest were mostly 7th and 8th realm heavenly venerables. The Fortune God dynasty's deep foundation was vividly reflected here. In this operation, Middle Tianzuan Yishiwan and the others had arrived at the Era tomb first. As for the West Empyrean, he was gathering experts from the rear. Empyreans of this level were all peak experts that could intimidate a region. It would take a certain amount of time to suddenly gather them and make them dare to come to the epic tomb. Even with so many experts guarding the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the Fortune Divine Dynasty still didn't have the upper hand against the combined forces of so many ancient eras. Therefore, this battle could still evolve into a bloody battle for Yi Shiwen and the others. Therefore, they did not dare to take it lightly. Obviously, the others were also wary of the Fortune God dynasty, which had such a powerful lineup, and did not dare to get too close. If they were killed by the Fortune God dynasty, then they would really have no place to cry. They were also different from powerful eras like the Demon Era. Even revenge might not hurt the Fortune God dynasty, so they could only unite to fight against these powerful eras. As soon as West Tianzuan came up, she approached the 3 people. Middle Tianzuan and East Tianzuan Yishiwan were needless to say. She had never seen Heaven Talisman Immortal before, but it did not prevent her from guessing his identity. After all, Yishiwan did not deliberately hide anything. The two had some sympathy for each other. After all, although there was no distinction between men and women on the path of cultivation, in fact, it was still rare for a woman to reach the level of peak heavenly venerables. It could be said that only a very small number of people had such opportunities. Talent, resources, and opportunities could not be lacking. However, he couldn't help but reveal an astonished expression when he looked at Yi Shiwen again. This guy has become stronger again. It had only been a short time since the last meeting in the Fortune God dynasty, but he had grown stronger again. Moreover, it wasn't just a slight improvement in his cultivation. Instead, he had clearly crossed over a realm, and his strength had clearly undergone a tremendous change. She didn't even need to investigate in detail to understand this difference. One could well imagine how strong Yi Shiwen was now. He even had a feeling that he was not inferior to himself. This was a kind of intuition, an intuition that he could not explain clearly. Yi Shiwen had just made a breakthrough, so he hadn't completely restrained his aura. Therefore, the West Lord could easily sense it. However, Yi Shiwen didn't intend to hide it. After all, he was the Eastern Heavenly Venerable. So, it was natural for him to possess such strength. If some things were not hidden, they would be able to deter those who were ready to make trouble. He hadn't entered the 9th realm yet. If he had entered the 9th realm, he wouldn't need to worry about anyone. In the fortune realm, apart from the old monster chaotic overlord, he could be said to be invincible. Even a middle heavenly venerable wouldn't be his opponent. Regardless of how shocked the West Heavenly Venerate was, it was clear that this wasn't the time to talk. They were all blocked outside Sage Absolute Sky's grave. It seemed like there was an invisible power blocking them from entering. Now, they had to think of a way to break through this layer of restriction and enter the tomb. In an instant, everyone began to use their own magical powers. All kinds of divine radiance bloomed above the entire era. All kinds of magical powers, laws, secret techniques, and so on were released. However, these attacks that attempted to break through this inexplicable restriction all failed. They were easily resolved. At this time, everyone recalled that this was a boundary left behind by Sage Absolute Heaven. How could it be broken so easily? One by one, the powerful existences sat down in front of the restriction and began to comprehend the mysteries of this boundary. Now, it was very obvious that it was simply impossible to rush in recklessly. The only way was to comprehend the many laws contained in this boundary. Only then could one break in. Even if it was only a small part of it, it was still much better than trying to break in by force. All of them were top figures in their respective epochs, and they could be said to be geniuses that were gifted by the heavens. They were absolute geniuses that were difficult to find even one in a trillion living beings. Things that ordinary people couldn't fathom were actually traceable to them. They didn't even need to comprehend the mysteries of this boundary. As long as they understood the operating principles of this boundary, they could find the loopholes and pass through it. This was much simpler than thoroughly comprehending this boundary. Otherwise, with the strength of Sage Absolute Heaven, it would be normal for everyone to comprehend the boundary he left behind for hundreds or even thousands of years. Even then, they might not be able to comprehend it completely. Yi Shiwen closed his eyes and began to comprehend the operating rules of this boundary frantically. In his body, the mysterious space constantly flashed with light. Countless information was analyzed and poured into his mind. After killing many heavenly masters in succession, all their wealth fell into Yi Shiwen's hands. At this time, Yi Shiwen could be said to be rich enough to rival a country. These were all peak heavenly masters. They were also the top figures of their respective era. All kinds of wealth and resources of these eras flowed into their hands in a steady stream. Apart from a large part that they used for their own cultivation, the rest all fell into Yi Shiwen's hands. Some of them were even the accumulation of treasures from the great apocalypse of the heavens and earth several times. Many of the treasures couldn't even be seen by future generations. Only during the great apocalypse or the beginning of the heavens and earth would there be world-destroying treasures or heaven-opening treasures. They were extremely rare. These were undoubtedly extremely precious things for the newly born martial arts era. Not to mention the resources and wealth used for cultivation. At this time, Yi Shiwen locked the king-level dragon veins in his inner world. It could be said that after this series of battles, he had become rich overnight. Now, even Middle Heavenly Masters were not as rich as him. Although Middle Heavenly Masters had the Fortune God dynasty and enjoyed countless resources, it would take time for the resources of the entire Fortune God dynasty to gather towards him bit by bit. It was impossible for him to exhaust the goose that laid the golden eggs. The accumulation and transfer of wealth were completed quietly. Yi Shiwen had not been an Eastern Heavenly Master for many years. Although there was a lot of wealth handed over from all over the Eastern region every year, in fact, he could not control too much. Most of it was handed over to the Fortune God dynasty's central arsenal. A part of it was used to maintain the operation of the Eastern Heavenly Palace. It was also used to reward the many tribes that were loyal to the Eastern Heavenly Palace. Although there was still a lot of wealth and resources left to him, it was still too little for his current cultivation speed. However, the wealth accumulated after plundering these peak heavenly masters and several great catastrophes was completely different. It could be said that Yi Shiwen's current wealth was at the top of the fortune god dynasty. Although the strength of middle heavenly masters was tyrannical, they had not slaughtered those peak heavenly masters in such a domineering manner. The fortune god dynasty continuously provided him with resources, but they were also continuously consumed by him. The accumulated amount was still not as much as Yi Shiwen's overnight wealth. At this time, in Yi Shiwen's inner world, there were hundreds of different types of king-level dragon veins. The laws of various eras were contained in them. However, this was not a problem for Yi Shiwen. He could use his great power to transform them into the purest energy. As for the dragon veins below king-level dragon veins, there were simply none. These peak heavenly masters would not accept such dragon veins. For powerhouses like them, it was useless no matter how many dragon veins there were below king-level dragon veins. The conversion rate was too low. Moreover, if they captured all kinds of dragon veins in one fell swoop, others would not be able to cultivate. This was essentially contrary to their development plans. And now, all of these dragon veins benefited Yi Shiwen. Not to mention, there were all kinds of treasures and divine materials piled up like mountains. Many rare divine materials were innate, acquired, and chaotic. They were all over the sky. Golden God rule chains locked the inner world. Now, all of these had become Yi Shiwen's help. Originally, Yi Shiwen was very worried about what to do with the resources needed for cultivation. But now, it seemed that there was no need to worry in the short term. One by one, the dragon veins were grabbed by the huge golden hands and thrown into the mysterious space. They continuously devoured the energy in these dragon veins. The mysterious space's efficiency was also operating to the maximum. Yi Shiwen's understanding of this great formation was also deepening. The more he understood, the more he was amazed. The absolute heaven sage's methods were indeed extraordinary. The great Tao contained in this barrier made him feel amazed. He could feel the huge gap it represented. It was like a chasm in front of him. Now that his combat strength had also entered the ranks of peak heavenly masters, it was time to consider some problems that he had not considered before. How to cross that barrier? Half-step ruler, half-step transformation. In the current situation where rulers like the fate creation heavenly monarch were no longer around, they were already the most powerful existences in countless eras. Whether it was for self-preservation or to protect the martial Tao epoch, that step was imperative. I understand. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes. There was a flash of brilliance in his eyes. He had already understood the operating rules of this barrier. Chapter 3702. After using the mysterious space, and filling in the king-level dragon vein, Yi Shiwen finally understood the operation law of this barrier. Sage Absolute Heaven had indeed surpassed many heavenly masters in all aspects. He had never heard that Sage Absolute Heaven was a top expert in the field of formation technique. However, he had surpassed any of the top experts in the field of formation techniques that Yi Shiwen knew. Yi Shiwen could feel that he had made a huge progress in his understanding of array formations after he had seen through the operating rules of this enchantment. He had stepped into another realm. This kind of understanding was very obvious. This was obviously not something that a heavenly master could have. He was not considered to be good at array techniques, but now he also felt that his understanding had increased a lot. After Yi Shiwen got up, he immediately turned the operation law of this array into information and spread it into everyone's mind. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen in astonishment. One must know that they hadn't had any clue even though they had started to comprehend it for some time. It was obvious that the level of this matrix was much higher than theirs. Therefore, even if they did not have to fully comprehend this formation, just understanding its operating rules was enough to give them a headache. If not for such a pressing situation, they might be happy to stay here and comprehend the great Tao of formations here. They could also feel that this was undoubtedly a great opportunity for them. However, it was obviously not such a good opportunity now. Therefore, they were all trying their best to understand, but obviously they had no clue so far. That was because the Middle Heavenly Master also had no clue in this aspect. Although his cultivation was undoubtedly the strongest among everyone, as the saying goes, there was a specialization in every field. In terms of speed, the Middle Heavenly Master had entered the realm of time, and could be said to have reached the peak. However, he was not good at array techniques, especially in the face of such a level of array technique. He was not much better than the others. However, this was the array technique left by Sage Absolute Heaven. It was impossible to break through it by force. Just when he was at his wit's end, Yi Shiwen had already understood the operation law of the array. This was the most shocking thing to everyone. They had never heard of a martial venerable being proficient in array technique. This was completely different from being proficient in saber Dao laws or sword Dao laws. This was because these were two completely different fields. Moreover, Yi Shiwen had never been known for his expertise in array formations. So, how did he achieve this? Could it be that revered Wu had some other expertise that they didn't know? However, in the face of such an amazing performance by Yi Shiwen, the Celestial Masters seemed to feel that they were a little used to it. Yi Shiwen seemed to have taken an unusual path from the beginning. Every time they thought that they had completely seen through Yi Shiwen, they would find that it was not the case at all. Yi Shiwen could always erupt with abilities that were far beyond everyone's imagination. Just in time, Middle Celestial Master smiled and nodded. I was waiting for them to make their move. Although waiting for orders isn't the best option, since they came here to find the so-called inheritance of Sage Absolute Heaven, they must have made thorough preparations. It's impossible for them to be trapped outside this barrier and unable to enter. When the time comes, we just need to follow them and find an opportunity to enter. Middle Celestial Master continued to explain. Of course, if they can't enter, it's even better. All the dangers can be automatically resolved. Everyone nodded. Although the martial epoch was caught off guard, the initiative was still in their hands. The other ancient eras wanted to obtain the inheritance of Sage Absolute Heaven, while the martial epoch's goal was to prevent them from obtaining the inheritance of Sage Absolute Heaven. Naturally, the best result would be for their martial epoch to obtain the Sage Absolute Heaven's inheritance, ending those people's hopes. However, if the experts of the other ancient epochs could not obtain the Sage Absolute Heaven's inheritance, then the martial epoch could accept such a result. On the contrary, the other ancient eras had too few choices. Not only could they prevent the Fortune God dynasty from obtaining the inheritance of Sage Absolute Heaven, but they also had to obtain the inheritance of Sage Absolute Heaven. Therefore, they had to be even more anxious. No matter what kind of trump card they had to use it. However, now that East Celestial Master has comprehended the law of the barrier's operation, the initiative is naturally in our hands. Naturally, it's even better. Middle Celestial Master laughed heartily. Handing the initiative to others and holding it in one's own hands were two completely different concepts. The other ancient era's experts had also noticed the changes happening here. The Fortune God dynasty had always been the focus of these ancient era's experts, and everyone knew that the Fortune God dynasty would not allow them to easily snatch Holy Monarch Absolute Heaven's inheritance. Both sides would inevitably engage in a fierce battle. Especially the experts of the Devil Path era, the Spirit Path era, and the Ghost Path era. All of them looked over. No matter how they looked at it, the martial epoch's actions didn't seem like an ordinary situation. Then, a scene that left them dumbfounded appeared. First, Yi Shiwen stepped into the barrier. After a few ripples appeared on the barrier's wall, he easily crossed it. It wasn't blocked by the barrier like before. Then, they saw that not only Yi Shiwen, but even Middle Celestial Master, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable, West Celestial Master, and other experts of the Fortune God dynasty also passed through the barrier one by one and easily reached the other side. Everyone jumped to their feet. If it was only Yi Shiwen who passed through, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, everyone had passed through, which meant that the Fortune God dynasty must have grasped the law of this barrier's operation. Therefore, they could ignore the barrier's defense and directly pass through. How is this possible? Archdevil Ancestor Rahu's eyes widened in shock. Even though he wasn't an expert in the field of array formations, he was definitely not bad at it. But the problem was, how did the people from the Fortune God dynasty pass through the Fortune God dynasty's array formation so easily when even he was clueless about it? Even if the Fortune God dynasty's team had great master heavenly venerables who specialized in array formations, it was absolutely impossible to break through the barrier left by Sage Absolute Heaven so easily. In fact, among the Devil Dao era's heavenly venerables, there were also experts who were extremely proficient in the Dao of array formations. However, they were still confused in such a short time. According to their estimations, it would take a long time to break through this barrier. Experts from other eras also looked at the Fortune God dynasty's group in shock. However, they could clearly see that the Fortune God dynasty's experts had grasped the law of the barrier. No matter how they did it, it was a fact in front of them. Holy Monarch Absolute Heaven's inheritance was about to fall into the hands of the Fortune God dynasty's experts. It wouldn't be unacceptable for it to fall into the hands of any ancient era's experts, but if it fell into the hands of the Fortune God dynasty, then the probability of them snatching it back would be very low. The Fortune God dynasty was too strong. Moreover, they had countless backup plans left behind by the Fortune God monarch. Even if a half-step sovereign realm expert barged in, as long as the Fortune God dynasty was willing to pay the price, they could stop him. How could they snatch the inheritance from the hands of middle celestial masters? Although they still didn't know what it was. Yi Shiwen and the others passed through the barrier. Looking at the anxious crowd outside, they couldn't help but reveal a smile. It was best if they couldn't enter. This would give them enough time to search for Sage Absolute Heaven's inheritance. No, we can't let them continue searching. Finally, Demon Ancestor Luoho couldn't bear the pressure anymore. He stood up from his seat and exchanged glances with the other demon ancestors. They quickly formed a formation with them as the center. In an instant, a majestic power soared out from the formation. Demon Ancestor Luoho waved his hand, and a scroll flew out from his hand. It turned into a beam of demonic light and disappeared into the formation. Soon, the formation began to surge, and a terrifying force instantly rolled out. Then, an incomparably huge battle axe suddenly flew out. It was the heaven-splitting devil axe. However, it wasn't the real heaven-splitting devil axe. It was merely a projection of the heaven-splitting devil axe. Although it was just a projection, it possessed unparalleled power. Boom! The projection of the splitting heaven devil axe directly cut into the barrier, causing the entire barrier to shake violently. A huge crack appeared on the barrier wall, and the originally perfect barrier immediately collapsed in one corner. The battle intent of the heaven-splitting devil axe wreaked havoc, eroding the barrier and preventing it from repairing itself. This attack was earth-shattering. The sky was filled with divine brilliance. Everyone only saw this scene when the divine brilliance dissipated. I originally planned to use it against the Fortune God dynasty. I didn't expect to use it here. Demon Ancestor Luoho sighed. This was a trump card that he had prepared, but he didn't expect to use it against the Fortune God dynasty. It was only used on this barrier. Sage Absolute Heaven's trump card wouldn't be found so easily. After Demon Ancestor Luoho slashed open the barrier, the others looked at each other. After exchanging a glance, they immediately turned into a torrent and flew into the barrier. They naturally wouldn't miss such a good opportunity. Archdevil Ancestor Luoho did not retract the wisp of heaven-splitting devil axe's will. The other ancient era's experts also joined in. Clearly, he understood that it was too strenuous for the Devil Path era to contend against the Fortune God dynasty with just the Devil Path era. We don't have much time left. We can't let them find it first, Middle Heavenly Venerate said solemnly. However, it was also good to force the Devil Dao era to use one of their trump cards. Chapter 3703. Since these ancient eras dared to fight for the treasures left behind by Sage Absolute Heaven, it was impossible that they didn't have a backup plan. This projection of the sky-splitting demonic axe was obviously a backup plan that the demon era had prepared. They were probably prepared to use it against the Fortune God dynasty at a critical moment, but now that things had come to this, they had obviously been forced to use it in advance. Although the other ancient eras were trapped outside this barrier, which was the best-case scenario that Yi Shiwen and the others had hoped for, it was still quite a bit of a difference. But overall, it was still worth it. The projection of the demonic splitting axe was extremely difficult to make. Even if it was just a projection, it contained great power. Just to make a scroll that contained this projection, who knew how many precious divine materials were needed to make it? It couldn't be replicated in large quantities. Although it couldn't compare to the sky-splitting demonic axe itself, it was still precious enough. The production cost could even make a great sect go bankrupt. It wasn't completely fruitless. However, when many experts arrived on the other side of the barrier through the crack left behind by the demon era, the trouble had just begun. In the distance, countless creatures derived from the law of death gathered. These creatures derived from the law of death were born with only one mission, and that was to protect Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb. When Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb had been drawn out by some unknown means, they had begun to gather here. Now, they had formed an endless army and were rushing over. Although these creatures were much weaker than real heavenly venerates, when their numbers reached a certain level, they could still pose a great threat to everyone. In the blink of an eye, all the creatures that had been spawned from the laws of nature had pounced on them. They simply ignored the barrier that had blocked them earlier and charged right through it. These barriers clearly didn't obstruct these creatures. In other words, they were a part of this era's tomb's defense system. These creatures didn't care what era it was. In their opinion, the only difference between them was that they were intruders. Not good, there are too many of these creatures. If we get delayed by them, I'm afraid trouble will come. The Middle Celestial Venerate's expression instantly turned serious. Around him, more and more law creatures appeared. Around him, the law of time was like a blade. Those law lifeforms couldn't even get close to him, as he would directly kill them. Every law lifeform that was slashed would instantly age. Time accelerated by millions of times, and they would instantly age and die a horrible death. How about this? I'll stay and block them. You guys go first. Yi Shiwen took the initiative to step forward. It just so happened that he could kill more of these law creatures and obtain more law of death crystals. The Middle Heavenly Venerate nodded and finally agreed. At this time, it would be best if someone stayed behind to cover the rear, and it couldn't be an ordinary person. Ordinary Heavenly Venerates simply wouldn't be able to stop so many law lifeforms. Among those present, only he and West Tianzuan could do it. Yi Shiwen or Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal could do it. Since Yi Shiwen volunteered, it was for the best. Let's go quickly. We can't let them get the treasures of Sage Absolute Heaven first. The Middle Heavenly Venerate looked over. Whether it was the Prowess era, the Ghost Dao era, or the Demon Dao era, they all made the same decision at the same time. They would leave behind a great expert to block the law creatures while the others retreated first. The other ancient eras that were much weaker were not so lucky, as they lacked the combat power of a peak Heavenly Venerate. There was no way they could single-handedly hold back these law creatures. After all, peak Heavenly Venerates were different. Currently, among the peak of the entire Heavenly Venerate realm, the weakest were Heavenly Venerates who had just entered the 9th realm. When Yi Shiwen had just entered the 8th realm, he was actually at this realm. After that, he had cultivated the 9th realm to the peak and was already an outstanding figure among the many heavenly venerates. Whether it was Senior Heavenly Talisman Immortal West Tianzuan Yi Shiwen or the 5 great heavenly venerates, they were all at this realm. This was the peak that almost all heavenly venerates could reach, and above them, there were other heavenly venerates that could innovate on this foundation. Although their combat power had not yet broken through to the half-step sovereign level, they were already above other peak heavenly venerates. Middle heavenly venerates and demon venerate Luoho both stood in this realm, only half a step away from the half-step sovereign level. They could break through at any time, but they could also be trapped in the Great Apocalypse several times without being able to break through. Middle heavenly venerates could even easily defeat the Moon City Lord. Although the Moon City Lord was slightly restrained by middle heavenly venerates, the gap between them was obvious. Yi Shiwen could stand in this realm when he was in the human conformity state. It was just that although Yi Shiwen's combat power was enough, he would suffer in a protracted battle, so he could not be considered a true expert in this realm. At most, he could only protect himself. But to ordinary peak heavenly venerates, he was already terrifyingly powerful. After killing several peak heavenly venerates in succession, he had become synonymous with a terrifying demon in the eyes of everyone. Although Yi Shiwen was not in the human conformity state, he had already completely recovered from the internal injuries he had suffered in the previous battle. In terms of combat power, he was stronger than ordinary peak heavenly venerates. It was not very likely that he could kill all these law lifeforms on his own. After all, there were too many of them, but it was still very easy for him to delay them. Yi Shiwen's body swayed slightly, and he immediately produced 3,000 martial arts incarnations. Although they were only martial arts incarnations and could not be compared to his main body, they were still much more tyrannical than these law creatures that were derived from a single law. In an instant, Yi Shiwen's 3,000 martial arts incarnations blocked off the escape route of the middle heavenly venerates and the others, not giving these law lifeforms any chance to rush over. If they went around in other directions, they would not be able to catch up. In Yi Shiwen's hand, the Gung metal ancestral chi appeared and turned into a long saber. Then, with a long roar, he turned into a long rainbow and single-handedly killed his way into these law lifeforms. Puchi! Yi Shiwen's long saber was tyrannical, and with a single slash, he chopped a law lifeform into pieces, turning it into the purest crystallization of the law of death that fused into Yi Shiwen's body. Even Yi Shiwen, who had cultivated to this level, could not help but be amazed. The absolute heaven sage was indeed terrifyingly powerful to be able to spawn so many law lifeforms. With his strength, he could naturally spawn some law lifeforms, but in reality, he could not do it to such an extent. These law lifeforms were almost comparable to the combat power of a heavenly venerate, which was why this place had become a place where emperors below the heavenly venerate could not enter. With his strength, the law lifeforms that he spawned were at most at the peak of the quasi-emperor level. He could not even reach the level of an emperor. After all, these law lifeforms won through sheer numbers, unlike the essence that the sword venerate had created with all his might. However, he would not belittle himself. He had not reached that level yet, and if he did reach that level one day, he would not be inferior to anyone. Boom! 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 Every time Yi Shiwen attacked, there was a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth. To him, this was just an instinctive attack, and every attack was the peak of the heavenly venerate level. The faces of the experts from the ability era, the ghost era, and the devil era twitched as they watched from afar. They were different from Yi Shiwen, who could focus on killing these law lifeforms. This was because they had to pay attention to Yi Shiwen's movements while killing these law lifeforms. Even if they did not pay attention to the matter of Yi Shiwen killing 5 heavenly venerates in one go at the beginning, they had heard about it from others later on. Any one of those 5 heavenly venerates would not be inferior to them. It could be said that even if the current Yi Shiwen was not in the state of human conformity, he could still firmly suppress them and rank among the strongest among the peak heavenly venerates. Only middle heavenly venerates, Rahu demon venerate, and the others could suppress the current Yi Shiwen. How could they not care about such a terrifying existence? If Yi Shiwen were to kill them on a whim, then they wouldn't even have a place to go to if they were to cry. They were naturally not afraid of ordinary peak heavenly venerates. Even the long-famous Western heavenly venerate and heavenly talisman immortal were not people they were afraid of, but who asked Yi Shiwen's previous battle achievements to be so valiant. If it could be said that he had relied on the power of human conformity to kill 5 heavenly venerates before, then the astonishing combat power that Yi Shiwen displayed now was enough to raise eyebrows. The law lifeforms that the other heavenly venerates had killed were not much different from the law lifeforms that he had killed, or even a little less, but there was no way around it. Who asked Yi Shiwen's 3,000 martial arts incarnations to be so exaggerated? With the power of the heavenly venerates, it was naturally not a problem to create many incarnations, but to create 3,000 incarnations that were equivalent to the strength of a heavenly venerate was a fantasy. In particular, each of these incarnations possessed different martial arts, and each of them was a peerless hero in the outside world. It was as if one person had plucked the essence of the martial era, which shocked them greatly. This was simply a joke. How could one person cultivate 3,000 completely different martial arts at the same time? He was simply a monster. No wonder his combat power could achieve something that they had never dared to hope for, which was to surpass realms and crush them. This is fake, right? How could someone do this? Many heavenly venerates exclaimed, dumbfounded. At this moment, when Yi Shiwen was killing the law of death lifeforms, he was vividly displaying his terrifying cultivation, which was even more shocking than when he had killed 5 heavenly venerates in succession. After all, he had killed 5 heavenly venerates in succession, unlike now, when he was practically blocking countless law lifeforms with his own strength. But at this moment, Yi Shiwen, who was killing in a frenzy, seemed to have entered a state of enlightenment. Chapter 3704. Puff. Yi Shiwen killed a law lifeform with a single slash. The law lifeform's body exploded and turned into a sky full of spirit energy that wrapped around a law of death crystal and entered Yi Shiwen's body. Yi Shiwen absorbed this spirit energy into the mysterious space, which just happened to replenish the mysterious space's consumption. The law of death crystal also melted in front of the mysterious space and was analyzed by the mysterious space. Through this analysis, Yi Shiwen's comprehension also increased at an astonishing speed. Originally, Yi Shiwen thought that these law lifeforms were just law lifeforms derived from the law of death as the core, but later, after in-depth analysis by the mysterious space, he discovered that this wasn't the case. There was also an inexplicable law at work, but it was hidden within the law of death. Even peak heavenly venerables couldn't distinguish it. If not for the mysterious space's analysis, he wouldn't have been able to discover the mysteries within. This law surpassed any law that Yi Shiwen knew. Generally speaking, the laws of each era were different. However, there was no absolute distinction between them. The early eras seemed to be relatively monotonous. They weren't as powerful as the later eras. However, they had also given birth to supreme existences who had run amok in the world. As the saying went, there was no superior law, and there were weak and strong people. This was the truth. However, this law was different. It was as if it had been sublimated to another level and touched the origin of the entire universe. It wouldn't change with the birth and destruction of the universe, but it was like a more core law. Yi Shiwen understood that this might be the key to reaching the legendary half-step sovereign realm, or perhaps the sovereign realm. It would break free from the shackles of the universe and live and die together with the chaos. Just this analysis alone was enough to make him feel that his cultivation base was improving. This was because his comprehension of the realms had increased even more. Even though his cultivation hadn't actually improved further, his combat power was actually increasing. Originally, he could exert 10% of his strength, but now he could exert 11% or even 12% of his strength. This was also inconceivable to many heavenly venerates. It was normal for low-level cultivators, but it was impossible for heavenly venerates to do so. The Emperor realm had already exerted the laws to the extreme, and heavenly venerables had already surpassed this limit. However, it was also because of this that they couldn't constantly challenge those of a higher level like before. Originally, using 10% of one's strength to unleash 11% or 12% of one's strength was within the limits of the rules. Now that the rules had been exceeded, it was naturally impossible to do it again. At this moment, he finally understood how Middle Tianzuan, Rahu Archdevil Ancestor, and the others did it. It was likely that they were already at the edge of half-step sovereign realm, and they could already feel the existence of the laws of heaven and earth. These people were the ones who truly had hope of entering the half-step sovereign realm. Whether it was the Western Heavenly Venerate, Heavenly Talisman Immortal Venerate, or the others, they seemed to be standing at the peak of the Heavenly Venerate realm. However, as long as they hadn't touched that realm, they wouldn't be able to do so. It was just like advancing from a sovereign emperor to a Heavenly Venerate. If one could not break through, one would not be able to break through. Even if one was a peak sovereign emperor for countless years, it would still be useless. The majority of peak Empyreans had also experienced the great shattering of the world again and again in such a situation. In the end, their life essence had been exhausted and they had died tragically. And now, Yi Shiwen had also begun to touch this edge. Although he had yet to truly step into the ninth realm, he had truly touched that kind of domain. He had always thought that he needed to enter the ninth realm before his combat power could be comparable to that of Middle Tianzuan and the others. However, it seemed that it wasn't so troublesome now. Yi Shiwen didn't know how shocking it was for him to reach this step. Throughout many eras, those who could cultivate to the Empyrean realm were already the only ones among billions of living beings. Among Empyreans, there were very few who could cultivate to the peak Empyrean realm. In the end, among those who stood at the peak of the Empyrean realm, there were pitifully few who could touch that realm and surpass the battle power of the peak Empyrean realm. Even among the peak existences of the various eras who stood at the peak of the Empyrean realm, only very few had the opportunity to touch this realm. He hadn't even reached the ninth realm, but he had already touched it. It could be said to be an unprecedented opportunity. If he hadn't come here, he didn't know how long it would have taken him to touch this barrier. Perhaps only by reaching the ninth realm would he be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with a Middle Empyrean, but that would only be in terms of pure combat power. He wouldn't be able to touch this realm. If he didn't touch this realm, he would never have the chance to break through to the half-step ruler realm. Although he didn't know how difficult it was, it didn't stop him from knowing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he grasped it, his battle power would improve even further. He might even be comparable to Middle Tianzuan and the others, becoming a true peak existence. Therefore, he decisively entered this state of epiphany. One by one, the king-level dragon veins were grabbed by the giant golden hand and thrown into the mysterious space. The mysterious space emitted a rainbow light that illuminated his entire inner world. It was as if countless gods were chanting sutras at the same time. Endless information poured into Yi Shiwen's mind like a torrent. This made it impossible for him to multitask. He had to kill those law beings while comprehending at the same time. This was because the things that surged into his mind and allowed him to analyze them were not any of the things that he had come into contact with in the past. They were the existences of a higher level of the laws of the world. Once he grasped them, he would enter a whole new realm. It was impossible for him to grasp it at the moment, but just being able to see a part of it was already extremely impressive. His battle power began to soar. And all of this was reflected in the speed at which he killed the law beings. His killing speed became faster and faster. At the beginning, he could kill one law being with a single slash. Later on, he could kill 10, 20, or even hundreds of law beings with a single slash. Every slash was exquisite and contained the laws of heaven and earth. It was extremely wondrous. The heavenly venerables in the distance were inexplicably shocked when they saw this scene. The speed at which Yi Shiwen was killing law beings alone was already comparable to all of them combined. Moreover, his speed was getting faster and stronger. He was so powerful that it was terrifying. Every slash seemed to be able to shatter a universe. It was unknown how much magic power was consumed, but looking at Yi Shiwen's limitless magic power, it didn't look like his magic power was going to dry up at all. This was the reason why they were even more shocked. Yi Shiwen's surroundings had already become a storm of saber light. All the law beings that approached him died. They couldn't even get close to him before they were slashed apart. However, they soon discovered that although Yi Shiwen's movements were extremely fast and his saber techniques were exquisite, his eyes were in fact lifeless. They didn't have that kind of quick-witted feeling. Soon, someone guessed it. He's gaining enlightenment? How is this possible? He's actually gaining enlightenment in such an intense battle. Everyone was shocked. It wasn't that they had never encountered such a state of epiphany before. It could even be said that in the past, epiphanies were as simple as eating and drinking for them. They were the children of providence. However, after reaching the heavenly venerable realm, such epiphanies became rarer and rarer. Every epiphany represented a leap in strength, but to have an epiphany in the midst of such an intense battle was simply unbelievable. Even when they were young, this kind of thing was rare. Since Yi Shiwen was in an epiphany, it was obvious that his cultivation would take another leap after his epiphany ended. The current Yi Shiwen was already terrifying enough. If he was allowed to make another breakthrough, would the others still have a way to survive? At that time, even Demon Venerable Rahu might not be able to suppress him. Suddenly, many people had fierce looks in their eyes. They wanted to interrupt Yi Shiwen's state of epiphany. They couldn't let him continue like this. Otherwise, there would be no way for them to survive. However, when they were about to make a move, they discovered that the martial venerable seal had flown out from above Yi Shiwen's head. It seemed as if it had suddenly sensed danger and automatically jumped out to protect him. The martial venerable seal rotated above Yi Shiwen's head, sprinkling a layer of enchantment to protect him. Seeing this scene, many people began to hesitate. They didn't dare to make another move. This was because they knew very well that with the protection of the martial venerable seal, it was impossible to kill Yi Shiwen even if they all attacked together. Breaking his state of epiphany seemed to have achieved its goal, but the problem was that he would inevitably fly into a rage after he came out of the state of epiphany. At that time, whoever made the first move would be the unlucky one. This kind of epiphany was an excellent opportunity for Yi Shiwen. Once it was broken, Yi Shiwen didn't know when he would get another opportunity like this. If they were in his shoes, they wouldn't let go of the person who disturbed them. One could imagine how furious Yi Shiwen would be when the time came. However, no one dared to say that they could stop Yi Shiwen. 5 heavenly venerables had died in his hands. What difference would it make if they were in his shoes? Thinking of this, no one was willing to make a move. They all hoped that someone else would take the lead. However, that person definitely couldn't be themselves. Under such inhumane thoughts, no one dared to disturb Yi Shiwen, who was in the state of epiphany. No one could bear the wrath of Yi Shiwen when he was furious. Yi Shiwen didn't know what was happening outside. He was wholeheartedly immersed in this extreme epiphany, feeling the improvement of his strength. Chapter 3705. This kind of extreme improvement was something that he could almost feel himself, because it wasn't because his skills had advanced by leaps and bounds, but because his control over his skills had improved to the next level, and the transformation of his combat strength was very obvious. This was the fundamental reason why Middle Heavenly Venerables, Rahu Demon Venerables, and the others were so powerful. And now Yi Shiwen had also touched upon this level. He didn't know that just now, many heavenly venerables had already decided to kill him, but none of them were willing to stand out, so they managed to avoid a calamity. Although it wasn't quite possible for them to kill Yi Shiwen, it was still possible to interrupt his state of epiphany. Although he had the protection of the martial elder seal, if so many heavenly venerables were determined to attack him, even Yi Shiwen's strength would only be enough to protect himself. He was now completely immersed in this sudden epiphany, and such an opportunity was extremely rare for him. The epiphany, coupled with the analysis of the mysterious space, allowed him to take a step forward in his comprehension. Slaughter. There was only endless slaughter. So much so that Yi Shiwen was already numb to it. His attacks were actually only left with a kind of instinct. His powerful battle instincts drove him to continuously slaughter these law lifeforms. At the same time, he was surrounded by the 3,000 martial arts avatars, isolating him from the existence of the last trace of danger, allowing him to wholeheartedly carry out epiphany and breakthrough on the battlefield. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even he didn't know how much time had passed, and in the end, he even lost his sense of time. It could have been a second, or it could have been who knew how many tens of thousands of years had passed. In the eyes of others, Yi Shiwen had single-handedly propped up a wall, blocking the surprise attacks of all the law lifeforms. As Yi Shiwen's comprehension continued to increase, he wasn't the only one displaying astonishing combat strength. Even the 3,000 martial arts avatars were transforming at an astonishing speed, constantly strengthening. Originally, apart from the martial arts that Yi Shiwen was most proficient in, the other martial arts avatars could only barely suppress these law lifeforms, but now they could completely suppress them. This made the space behind him the only pure land. No matter how the law lifeforms attacked, it was like a raging wave slamming against a reef, but in the end, they were all smashed to pieces by the reef. They could not break through. These law lifeforms were still endless, but no matter how they attacked, they seemed to be lacking a little. If it were an ordinary peak Empyrean, they would also have to consider the problem of their magic power drying up. A celestial venerate's power was boundless, but that was under normal circumstances. However, in such a great battle, every slash required one to exert all their strength in order to break these law lifeforms. Although law lifeforms couldn't compare to ordinary celestial venerates, their combat prowess was definitely on the same level, and they were by no means easy to deal with. Every slash consumed a lot of magic power. It was a huge consumption even for a heavenly master's own recovery ability. Under normal circumstances, Yi Shiwen should have quickly withdrawn from the epiphany because his magic power would have been exhausted. Even a middle heavenly master wouldn't be able to withstand such a crazy consumption. Blocking these law beings was a sacrifice in itself, but Yi Shiwen was different. He reaped benefits from it. The king-level dragon veins that he had plundered previously were continuously burned and thrown into the mysterious space to replenish his magic power consumption. Hence, he wasn't afraid of consumption at all. He had just made a fortune, so he could support such consumption. The wealth that other celestial venerates had accumulated over countless years was now in his pocket. Anyway, he was used to being a prodigal, so he didn't feel any heartache. He wasn't afraid of anything at all. A total of 100 king-level dragon veins were used up in this process. It was equivalent to a peak heavenly venerate's savings of several eras being completely consumed in this epiphany. One could imagine how shocking this consumption was. Apart from Yi Shiwen, no one would be so crazy as to go from a tycoon to a pauper overnight. Even an ordinary peak heavenly venerate wouldn't be able to withstand such a drop. And this wasn't the first time Yi Shiwen had faced such a situation, so he naturally didn't care. In other words, he saw through everything very clearly. He knew what was most important and what wasn't. Raising his cultivation was naturally the top priority. Otherwise, what was the use of this wealth? By the time he came back to his senses, a full day and night had passed. A day and night passed in the blink of an eye for a heavenly venerate, but the things he had gained in that day would be useful for millions of years to come. In this day, he had come into contact with another domain, another world. It was as if he had been reborn. At this time, he could already confirm that he was comparable to a middle heavenly venerate. Boom! Countless magic power in Yi Shiwen's body erupted in an instant, turning into a terrifying torrent that swept in all directions. He took a deep breath, and suddenly, the spirit energy within countless miles was like a torrent that was sucked in by him. His breathing coincided with the breathing of this era's tomb. Every breath he took contained great power. His cultivation clearly didn't increase by much, but the current Yi Shiwen gave people the feeling that he had become several times stronger. "Half-step ruler, I'm very close," Yi Shiwen said. Although he was only at the peak of the 8th realm, he felt that the true strength of a half-step ruler was right in front of him. That was a kind of comprehension of the realm. It wasn't just a simple increase in strength. At this time, he looked around again. There was no one else in sight. The heavenly venerates in charge of bringing up the rear had already left. After all, they just wanted to delay for a while so that the law life forms wouldn't catch up to them and surround them. They didn't really want to fight to the death with these law life forms. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. Those heavenly venerates wanted to take advantage of his moment of enlightenment to kill him. On the other hand, it wasn't as if he didn't have the intention of making them stay here. The martial epoch and the other ancient epochs were already irreconcilable enemies. The difference in strength between the two epochs was also a constant. If he could kill a few more heavenly venerables here, especially peak heavenly venerables, then the threat of those ancient epochs to the Fortune Divine Dynasty would be much smaller. Moreover, his strength had skyrocketed. It could be said that unless he encountered an old half-step ruler, he wouldn't be afraid no matter how many people came. He didn't even need to enter the state of human body unification to heavily injure them. What a pity! Consider yourselves lucky! Yi Shiwen sneered. His body trembled slightly, and the 3,000 martial arts incarnations turned into 3,000 martial arts currents that poured back into his body. At this time, the law life forms were still endless. They were a vast expanse of dark clouds, but it was obvious that there were far fewer than before. The decrease could be seen with the naked eye. One could imagine how many law life forms Yi Shiwen had slaughtered in one day and one night. With a flip of his palm, a fist-sized crystallization of the Edict of Death appeared. This was formed from the crystallization of the Edict of Death in the bodies of the law life forms he had slain. Although it did not look big, its purity had long reached an unimaginable level. With this law of death crystal, Yi Qianqian and Hua Menghan's breakthrough to the heavenly venerable realm was just around the corner. It might not even take 10,000 years. 10,000 years later, the human race would have several great heavenly venerates overseeing it. It would only be a matter of time before they became the strongest race under the heavens. It wouldn't be a race on the level of the top 10 races, but a pure number 1 race under the heavens. The number 1 race under the Fortune God dynasty would be invincible in the entire Fortune realm. Not to mention, as long as he oversaw it, the situation of the human race would be as stable as Mount Tai. The human race would naturally receive great benefits as his strength increased. A day has passed. I wonder if the middle heavenly venerates and the others have found it. Yi Shiwen muttered to himself, and his figure disappeared in mid-air. When he reappeared, he was already in the tomb of the Absolute Heaven Sage. Those law lifeforms couldn't even catch up to him. At this time, Yi Shiwen's speed was close to that of a middle heavenly venerable. He had also reached the peak of speed in this domain. This was the domain that a middle heavenly venerable was most proficient in. In fact, for Yi Shiwen, this was just one of his many martial arts domains. One could imagine how terrifying the current Yi Shiwen had become. After entering the world of the Absolute Heaven Sage's tomb, Yi Shiwen immediately felt a kind of suppression. It was as if he had entered another ancient era. That kind of powerful suppression, whether it was his speed, power, or perception, all were suppressed to a considerable extent. However, he didn't take it to heart. With the strength of the Absolute Heaven Sage, it was natural for him to have such strength. Of course, the most important thing was that he was suppressed. He didn't believe that others would not be suppressed. Since they were all suppressed, it didn't matter. At this time, in an area of the Absolute Heaven Sage's tomb, several figures streaked across the sky like streamers. Among these figures, the one in the lead was a beautiful woman dressed in white with a graceful figure. However, she looked a little disheveled at this time. There was a huge hole in her chest, and golden blood kept flowing out. Even with her strength, there was no way for her to recover. One could imagine how troublesome this injury was. West Heavenly Venerable, you can't escape. Today, all the people of the Fortune God dynasty will die here. A cold shout came from behind her. This beautiful woman was none other than the West Heavenly Venerable. As a high and mighty peak Heavenly Venerable of the Fortune God dynasty, she had never been in such a disheveled situation. She was being chased by others. Hearing this, she only bit her red lips slightly. Her expression became even colder, and she accelerated her escape. Chapter 3706. Behind the West Celestial Sovereign, another figure was hot on his heels. His figure was like a mountain, surrounded by the aura of countless divine abilities. Each divine ability had evolved its own intelligence and evolved into a world. It was extremely powerful, and he alone could suppress an era. This was a peak heavenly venerate from the divine ability epoch. His aura was strong, and his magic skills were tyrannical. He was no weaker than the West Heavenly Venerate. However, he was now at his peak, while the West Heavenly Venerate had been severely injured. The two of them, who were originally on equal footing, were now the prey and the hunter. They were no longer on equal footing. Behind this peak Heavenly Venerate were four Heavenly Venerates from the Divine Ability epoch. They were equally strong. Although they could not compare to the peak Heavenly Venerate of the Divine Ability epoch, they were still strong existences in the 7th and 8th realms. There was even a 9th realm existence. 1 7th realm, 2 8th realm, and 1 9th realm. Even a peak Heavenly Venerate would not dare to underestimate such a lineup. Furthermore, there was a peak Heavenly Venerate from the Divine Ability epoch leading them. It was no wonder that such a lineup could put the equally famous West Heavenly Venerate in such a sorry state. Although the West Heavenly Venerate was also strong, he could not be compared to before. He was at an unprecedented low. Divine Sky Gazer, your Divine Ability epoch is tired of living. How dare you get involved in this matter? Aren't you afraid of becoming the mortal enemy of my Fortune God dynasty? The West Heavenly Venerate said loudly. Her voice was clear, but it sounded like a phoenix's cry. The Fortune Divine dynasty's strength far surpassed any ancient era. Even if it was the Divine Ability era that was famous for its strength, to the Fortune Divine dynasty, the only thing that mattered was whether they were willing or not whether they could do it or not. Therefore, there were very few ancient eras that were willing to fight to the death with the Fortune Divine dynasty. After all, the difference in strength was too great. Taking the lead would only benefit the other ancient eras. No one would be so foolish as to work for others. The West Heavenly Venerate's expression became even more solemn and indifferent. She knew how powerful Divine Sky Gazer was. He could be considered one of the top powerhouses of the divine ability epoch. Normally, she would not be afraid or worried. However, she was now severely injured. She would not even be able to fight an ordinary ninth realm heavenly venerate, let alone other peak heavenly venerate. Western venerate, I think you are still not awake yet. Do you think that your martial epoch still has a future? This time, your martial epoch will be destroyed. At that time, it will be pretty good if you can survive. You still want revenge. Divine Venerate Sky Raising said with an extremely cold expression, while laughing loudly. Countless rays of light from divine arts bloomed in the world, illuminating his face. He didn't have a face, but a mass of colorful hazy energy. It was just that this energy had turned into a human face. This was not a humanoid creature in the first place. It was just a Taoist form that had taken on a humanoid form in the later stages. This was also the reason why Shao Chun dared to chase after the Western Heavenly Venerate. He believed that the martial epoch would not be able to survive this crisis. Otherwise, chasing after the Western Heavenly Venerate, who was in the upper echelon of the martial epoch, would be a huge provocation to the martial epoch. Doing so would basically be seeking death. Even the Divine Ability era could not withstand the Fortune Divine Dynasty's wrath. While Shao Chun was speaking, Divine Venerate Sky Raising caught up with the Western Heavenly Venerate and stood in front of him. Behind him, several Divine Ability era's Heavenly Venerates also surrounded the Western Heavenly Venerate, blocking all his escape route. The Western Heavenly Venerate could already feel that several divine senses were locked onto her. As long as she moved, a terrifying attack would sweep over like a thunderbolt. Western Heavenly Venerate, I know that you are famous in the Fortune Divine Dynasty and have a high status. However, the Fortune Divine Dynasty is about to be destroyed. Do you still want to be buried with the Fortune Divine Dynasty? Now, our Theurgy era is in need of people. If you are willing to rely on our Theurgy era, your status will not be inferior to mine. Qingtian Divine Venerable said. He looked at West Lord Tianzuan and stated his conditions. An ordinary Heavenly Venerate would not make him personally take action. However, a peak Heavenly Venerate like the Western Heavenly Venerate was a different matter. There were not many people like him in the Divine Ability era. If he was willing to join, he would, of course, be a top figure. However, if you don't know what's good for you, not only will Sage Absolute Heaven be buried here today, but you will also die. Divine Venerate Sky's voice became colder and colder. The killing intent in his voice was boiling. Everyone could feel his determination. As long as the Western Heavenly Venerate was unwilling to surrender, he would kill him. Ha 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 ha. Do you think that is possible? The Fortune Divine Dynasty is at its peak. Even if the Martial Dao era is destroyed, will it be worse than your Divine Ability era? Stop daydreaming. I am not the City Lord of Moon City. It is impossible for me to surrender. The Western Heavenly Venerate said with an unusually firm expression. Since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, don't blame us for being impolite. Divine Venerate Sky sneered. As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly made a move. Countless divine abilities surged around him. It was as if one person had cultivated all the divine abilities in the world. Finally, these divine abilities surged out and turned into a torrent that swept in the direction of the Western Heavenly Venerate. Rumble! Wherever the torrent of divine abilities passed by, the heavens and earth would tremble. The light of countless divine abilities filled the entire world, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. The power of a single person was enough to cause the entire world to tremble. The Western Heavenly Venerate's expression became more and more serious. She took a step back, but she immediately discovered that the other four Heavenly Venerates of the Divine Ability era had also stepped forward and blocked all her escape routes. It was obvious that they were unwilling to give her a chance to escape. In an instant, the West Heavenly Venerate understood her situation. She took a deep breath. Then, her snow-white skin turned deep blue in an instant. Countless blue water attribute nomological laws appeared in an instant. These water attribute nomological laws completely condensed and turned into countless water cannons that traversed the sky. Each of these cannons was millions of miles long. It was as if they were going to pierce through the heavens and earth. Boom! 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 The torrent of water cannons formed by the water attribute nomological laws collided with the endless divine ability torrent. In an instant, the blue light of the nomological laws and the seven-colored divine ability torrent buried everything. It seemed as if only these two kinds of nomological laws were left in the world. The entire world was shaken, and cracks appeared on the space wall. It was almost unable to withstand such a collision. However, in the next moment, a mysterious force repaired these cracks. It was as if nothing had happened at all. However, the terrifying might of the two attacks was evident from this. This terrifying collision was just the beginning. In the next moment, someone moved. However, it wasn't ultimate God Chintian. Instead, it was West Heavenly Venerate, who had been seriously injured and thought to only have the strength to fight back. Her figure instantly appeared in front of ultimate God Chintian. She was extremely fast. Similarly, she slapped out with her white palm. Although it was just one hand, it had a kind of terrifying power that could suppress the world and cause it to collapse. This was her trump card. If she hadn't been forced to the extreme, she wouldn't have used it so forcefully. She also knew that this could be said to be the worst situation she had ever been in, but she had no other choice. If she took the initiative to attack now, she might have a chance. If she didn't, she would probably be trapped to death. She knew that ultimate God Chintian was also an experienced expert. It would be very difficult to escape from his hands. In that case, it was better to fight with all her might to have a chance of survival. Humph! Hierarch Chintian couldn't help but snort when he saw that the West Heavenly Venerate had dared to make the first move. However, he wasn't afraid at all. His body didn't move an inch, but a huge phantom appeared around him. He had actually used a martial path technique to fight against the West Heavenly Venerate. This kind of martial arts was not unique to the martial epoch. It had only reached great perfection in the martial epoch. However, ultimate God Chintian's method was still unique. He used the magical epoch's magical ability to catalyze the martial epoch's magical ability. It could be said that this was a method of a genius. If he directly cultivated the martial Tao as a type of divine ability, it would not conflict with the divine ability Tao that he cultivated. This was completely different from the martial epoch's method. Although many people cultivated the martial epoch's magical abilities, they integrated them into the martial epoch's great path and cultivated them as a method of the martial epoch. For example, the West Heavenly Venerate's water laws also had martial art methods and magical ability method. They were completely different methods. Each was different and had their own merit. However, they were all powerful methods that reached the peak of perfection. Boom! 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 The two peak Heavenly Venerates exchanged more than 1,000 moves in an instant. Even the Heavenly Venerates responsible for blocking West Heavenly Venerate's escape route felt extremely horrified by the horrifying light and the sweeping energy tide. They all activated their protective magical abilities to protect themselves. Otherwise, they felt that they would be affected by the aftermath. Just the aftermath alone could severely injure them. Such a battle was crazy, but the outcome was soon determined. The severely injured West Heavenly Venerate was quickly defeated after fighting hard for a while. West Heavenly Venerate vomited a mouthful of blood and retreated repeatedly. In the previous collision, she had used all her strength, but she still could not break out of the encirclement. At this time, she could no longer suppress her injuries, and they all erupted. West Heavenly Venerate, this day next year will be the anniversary of your death. Hierarch Chintian shouted and was about to make a move. Suddenly, a roar pierced through the heavens and the earth from afar. Chapter 3707. A loud roar turned into a terrifying tornado that swept across the world and directly swept in the direction of Divine Master Qingtian. Suddenly, Hierarch Qingtian was alarmed and his hair stood on end. It was as if a terrifying thought had fallen on him. Boom! Divine Master Qingtian raised his hand and smashed the tornado formed by the roar. However, he also missed the opportunity to further injure West Heavenly Venerate or even kill her. West Heavenly Venerate also took advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to retreat and avoid Divine Master Qingtian's attack. Her pretty face was full of unwillingness. It was not that she was inferior to Divine Master Qingtian, but she had been seriously injured previously. How could she be a match for Divine Master Qingtian, who was still at his peak? The other magical era's heavenly venerates had just reacted. They were on high alert and got into a fighting stance. At this moment, a figure cut in and stood in front of West Heavenly Venerate to protect her. The magical era's heavenly venerates gasped when they saw the appearance of this person. Eastern Heavenly Venerate. At this time, they also learned from others that Wu Zun, the younger generation of the Fortune God dynasty, was now the Eastern Heavenly Venerate of the Fortune God dynasty. The Fortune God dynasty was the current era's era. It was like a blazing sun in the sky, and its strength was formidable. Yi Shiwen's strength could be imagined since he was able to become one of the supreme experts of the Fortune God dynasty. Previously, Yi Shiwen's terrifying combat power when he killed 5 heavenly venerates made everyone truly understand how terrifying Yi Shiwen was. Therefore, when they saw him, they couldn't help but gasp. Eastern Heavenly Venerate, it's you! West Heavenly Venerate saw Yi Shiwen and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. There was nothing in the world that made her happier than this. This time she thought that she was doomed. She didn't expect Yi Shiwen to appear here. She couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. She wasn't as nervous as before. Although she had never seen Yi Shiwen's strength, she had heard about it from the Middle Heavenly Venerate. There was no doubt that he was on par with her. Now that Yi Shiwen was here, the crisis was resolved. West Heavenly Venerate, how did things turn out like this? What about a Middle Empyrean? Forget it, I won't talk about it for now. Let's kill these guys first. Yi Shiwen had a lot of doubts in his heart, but obviously, this was not the time to explain. For these experts from the Divine Ability era to be able to chase the West Heavenly Venerate into such a sorry state, it was obvious that something earth-shattering had happened. Eastern Heavenly Sovereign, don't be too arrogant. Do you think you can kill all of us by yourself? At that moment, the only 7th stage Heavenly Venerate in the Divine Ability epoch stepped forward and said, "You Junior." Before he could even finish his words, his head suddenly exploded and turned into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Above his head, the curved blade formed from the gung metal ancestral chi spun. It was the blade that turned his head into a bloody mist just now, and even his soul was wiped out. It was just one slash, but it was too fast. It was so fast that no one could react. He's dead. He actually killed. Several other Heavenly Venerates finally reacted. The 7th stage Heavenly Venerate actually died in an instant. He was a famous and powerful existence in their Divine Ability era. There was no earth-shattering battle, nor was there any earth-shattering attack. It was just a simple instant kill. What was an instant kill? This was an instant kill. When they killed emperors below the Heavenly Venerate in an instant, it was just like this. However, they had never tried to kill a Heavenly Venerate in an instant, or been killed in an instant. Suddenly, they only felt that their juniors were incomparably cold. If they were just afraid before, then it was not as simple as just being afraid now. It could be said that it had suddenly risen to the point of fear. Yi Shiwen's combat power seemed to be even more terrifying than when he killed the 5 great Heavenly Venerates in a row. However, only God Qingtian's expression was extremely ugly. If others only had doubts, Then he had already confirmed that Yi Shiwen was indeed much more terrifying than when he killed the 5 great heavenly venerates in a row. At that time, Yi Shiwen's combat power was not so terrifying. In other words, if Yi Shiwen wanted to show such an amazing attack at that time, it was impossible to do it so easily. He could only do it in a way that made people conform to one. Even if he could do it, it would inevitably stir up a storm. Although it looked powerful and terrifying, it felt like a bluff compared to this kind of understatement. The current Yi Shiwen was truly terrifying. At this time, when Yi Shiwen's eyes swept over, it was like being stared at by a beast sleeping in the darkness. There was an extremely terrifying feeling in an instant. His whole back was cold, and he was soaked in cold sweat all of a sudden. How incredible was this! Although he was in human form, he was not a human. It was impossible for him to have cold sweat. However, such a situation suddenly occurred. One could imagine how terrifying Yi Shiwen's deterrence was now. West Tianzuan was also in shock. Yi Shiwen, who had just appeared on the stage, had displayed a shocking combat power. He killed a 7th realm Tianzuan in a second and left the opponent without a burial place. This kind of thing seemed to be understated and nothing much, but the information contained in it was that Yi Shiwen's strength had completely crushed the 7th realm Tianzuan. He had killed the 7th realm Tianzuan in a second and even made him unable to fight back. It should be said that he did not even have the time to react before he died. When Yi Shiwen attacked just now, even the West Heavenly Venerate only saw a golden light, and the 7th realm Heavenly Venerate died. If he was the 7th realm Heavenly Venerate, the current situation would not be optimistic. This speculation instantly shocked him. Originally, he had just accepted that Yi Shiwen could be on par with him, but now he had already seen that Yi Shiwen was even above him. How could this be possible? So long-winded. A dying person is still so long-winded. Yi Shiwen just said indifferently. He didn't take the matter of killing a 7th realm Heavenly Venerate to heart. It was as simple as cutting a weed on the roadside. Let's go together. This guy is too tricky. The remaining magical ability era Heavenly Venerates instantly felt a sense of extreme danger. Yi Shiwen's current strength was enough to kill them. They just glanced at each other, and there was no need for any words. They immediately had a tacit understanding. The 3 of them joined forces, and countless magical abilities swept out directly. These magical abilities were all existences that had been refined countless times in the magical ability era. They were all-encompassing, and everything between heaven and earth was manifested here. In particular, one of them was a 9th realm Heavenly Venerate. He was only half a step away from becoming a peak Heavenly Venerate. It could be said that it was only a matter of time. Now, he was already a pivotal existence in the magical ability era. Rumble! Endless energy surged between heaven and earth. In an instant, blazing divine radiance annihilated everything. The few great Heavenly Venerates couldn't help but sigh in relief. Even a peak Heavenly Venerate couldn't really remain indifferent to such an attack. They would also have to carefully dodge it. Although there was a gap in strength between them and a peak Heavenly Venerate, they were still in the same realm after all. However, when the boundless divine light dissipated and revealed the figure within, they were immediately dumbfounded. They almost couldn't believe what they had just seen. How is this possible? The 3 great Heavenly Venerates said with their mouths wide open. They couldn't believe it because Yi Shiwen had completely blocked their attack. It couldn't even be considered blocking, because their attacks couldn't even break through Yi Shiwen's defense. Their attacks could only set off a slight ripple in the golden streamer flowing on Yi Shiwen's body. They couldn't even hurt a single hair on Yi Shiwen's body. Is this all you've got? Yi Shiwen sighed slightly. This is really disappointing. I thought you would force me to use some of my strength and let me see what level I've reached. Too weak. Yi Shiwen's words couldn't help but make the 3 extremely ashamed and angry. They were completely despised by Yi Shiwen. Ever since they achieved the Tao, this was the first time someone had used such a contemptuous tone to say that they were too weak. Too weak. Too weak. Too weak. This was a 100 million critical hit. On the side, both Divine Master Qin Tian and Western Venerate were equally stunned. Yi Shiwen's current performance was too shocking. He was like a top master of physical cultivation. He was even more terrifying than a physique master. In this field, he had really reached the peak and was unimaginably powerful. The corners of West Heavenly Venerate's mouth twitched slightly, and her beautiful face was filled with disbelief. Just this shocking body cultivation technique alone was already comparable to a peak Heavenly Venerate, not to mention that he also had a similarly earth-shattering martial arts cultivation. This kind of cultivation was comparable to a Middle Empyrean. On the other hand, Divine Master Qin Tian of the magical era felt like 10,000 alpacas were galloping in his heart. It was completely the same feeling. This is crazy. How can I play like this? The three holy masters of the magical era glanced at each other. In an instant, a terrifying light burst from their eyes. Countless auras sublimated and spread throughout their bodies. All of a sudden, the three of them sublimated to the extreme and raised their own combat power to the extreme. They all rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 3708. Without exception, these three heavenly venerates were all ranked among the most powerful heavenly venerate. 2 were at the 8th level, and 1 was at the 9th level. The 3 of them joined forces and ascended to the peak. What a shocking scene this was! If this wasn't in the tomb of Sage Absolute Heaven, but in any other era's small world, it might cause the world to collapse completely. The aura of the 3 heavenly masters was too terrifying. Heaven and earth were about to collapse. If it wasn't a universe, it wouldn't be a universe. The 3 of them joined forces and attacked Yi Shiwen ruthlessly. In an instant, the world was filled with all kinds of magical powers. The blazing light almost illuminated the world as it rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Each type of magical power had a god sitting cross-legged within it. Billions of lights and billions of gods were indeed powerful and terrifying. The reason why the 7th Realm Magical Power era's Celestial Master had been instantly killed by Yi Shiwen wasn't because he was too weak, but because Yi Shiwen was too strong. When the 3 of them joined forces, the terrifying phenomenon that appeared was enough to explain everything. All the attacks were controlled. Although they were overwhelming, not a single one of them leaked out to attack the West Heavenly Master. This was because they all knew that the person who would decide the outcome of the battle was none other than Yi Shiwen. If they couldn't defeat Yi Shiwen, what was the use of killing the West Heavenly Master? In the end, they would still die. Yes, they only wanted to defeat Yi Shiwen. As for killing Yi Shiwen, it was simply impossible. In the face of the collective attack of the 3 heavenly masters, Yi Shiwen just sneered. He roared, clenched his fingers into fists, and his 2 arms blasted out like artillery shells. One turned into an azure dragon that danced in the sky, and the other turned into a vermilion bird that let out a deafening cry. The 2 great mythological beasts swept across the sky. The azure dragon mythological beast Divine Beast flicked its tail and killed countless gods that had evolved from magical powers. The vermilion bird directly opened its mouth and spat out countless Nanmingli fire, turning the world into a sea of fire. The gods that rushed over with magical powers were almost immediately burned to ashes. Everything returned to the origin. Yi Shiwen's 2 arms directly smashed the magical powers that filled the sky into pieces. Then, it directly blasted towards the 3 of them. The entire universe was trembling. The expressions of the 3 holy masters changed. Yi Shiwen's attack was too fast and too tyrannical. He had broken their offensive with just 2 fists. Even though they had thought that there might be a gap between them, they had never thought that there would be such a big gap. Yi Shiwen had suppressed all of their attacks with just 2 simple fists. The azure dragon was roaring, and the vermilion bird was crying. Everything was boiling in an instant. Yi Shiwen seemed to be the only heaven and earth in this world. Black Tortoise was in front, and White Tiger was behind him. The power of the 4 elephants was protecting him. This was an extremely powerful technique. Humph, you overestimate yourself. Yi Shiwen moved. In an instant, his figure shuttled through time and space. Because his speed was too fast, he actually annihilated time and space when he moved. Just by relying on speed alone, he could sweep through the world and possess great power. Middle heavenly masters were people who had reached the pinnacle of this path. They had advanced to the law of time from the law of speed and possessed unparalleled attack method. There was no need for more movements. As long as the speed was fast enough, it was terrifying enough. The space in front of the 3 holy masters suddenly exploded. Countless flames began to burn wildly. They directly rushed towards them, wanting to ignite them. At this time, Yi Shiwen's strength was fully reflected. Not good. The 3 of them retreated again and again. Each retreat was 1,000,000 miles. They wanted to avoid Yi Shiwen's attack. The 3 of them had arranged thousands of defenses in this 1,000,000 miles. This was formed in an instant. They had done it instinctively. The moment Yi Shiwen made his move, there was an extremely terrifying feeling that rushed from the soles of their feet to their heads. It was a warning that their lives had been strongly threatened. However, these thousands of defenses were shattered in an instant. In an instant, under Yi Shiwen's absolute speed, they were completely shattered. His speed was too fast. He had directly entered the domain of time. Fast, fast, fast. When one's speed reached a certain level, it would become an extremely powerful means of attack. In addition, Yi Shiwen's virtuous tyrant form golden body was extremely tyrannical. His rampage was more powerful than any attack method. The 3 of them were shocked. They couldn't stop Yi Shiwen at all. Yi Shiwen was too fast and too strong. They couldn't stop him at all. However, at this time, another terrifying aura rose behind Yi Shiwen. It was sublimated to the extreme. This person was none other than God Qingtian. When Yi Shiwen's offensive was at its fiercest, he finally couldn't stand it anymore. He made his move. Originally, he was afraid of the existence of Western Heavenly Master. He didn't make a move directly. At the same time, he also wanted to let the 3 holy masters test Yi Shiwen's water and see how strong Yi Shiwen was. After all, although he had seen Yi Shiwen's attack before, he hadn't really fought with him. After all, he was still a little weaker. He didn't have absolute confidence. Who knew that Yi Shiwen's attack would be so terrifying? It was a fatal attack. It was earth-shattering and annihilating. This caused him to be unable to continue waiting like this. Otherwise, with Yi Shiwen's terrifying offensive strength, he might really be able to heavily injure or even kill all of them. At that time, he would be the only one left without any help, and that would truly be courting death. God Qingtian's attack was even more terrifying. It was not like when he dealt with Western Heavenly Master. In fact, it was even more terrifying than that. Countless laws were drained like seawater. Then, it instantly appeared in front of Yi Shiwen and turned into a huge cage. It wanted to lock him in and seal him inside. Humph! Yi Shiwen sneered. His body swayed slightly and directly smashed the cage. It couldn't stop him at all. This was a method of the magical era. The martial epoch also had similar martial arts that could achieve a similar effect. After coming into contact with that level, Yi Shiwen's horizons were completely different. Originally, they were 2 completely different great daos in his eyes. Now, he had a feeling that they were the same. The origin of all great ways faintly pointed in one direction. It was like countless long rivers finally rushing into the sea. He could feel that, if he could really comprehend and understand it, he might not be far away from transcendence. Yi Shiwen smashed the cage all of a sudden. However, his movements were still slightly hindered. This bought enough time for the three of them to arrange layers of arrays and enchantments one after another. Then, they hid themselves in the endless space. Boom! A terrifying collision came. Endless divine brilliance shone in the world. The collision of the two sides formed a terrifying energy that annihilated the world and turned into an absolute death domain. Puff, puff, puff. The three heavenly venerables were directly knocked away. They felt as if all the bones in their body were broken. They directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Yi Shiwen's collision was too terrifying. Even though they hid behind layers of arrays and boundaries, they couldn't escape from the depths of the endless space and time. This was because Yi Shiwen didn't need to grab them. He simply smashed the space where they were standing into pieces. They didn't even have a place to stand. Where else could they go? They were directly hit and seriously injured. This was because Yi Shiwen had been hindered. Otherwise, the consequences would have been even more unpredictable. Incomparable horror and fear flashed in the eyes of the three. Was this still a heavenly venerables? Could a heavenly venerables really be so tyrannical? He only relied on the speed law to seriously injure them to this extent. It was true that there was no strong or weak technique. There was a difference between people. However, the one who was truly horrified was the Western venerables. This was because she discovered that the current Yi Shiwen looked like a middle heavenly venerables. She couldn't be more familiar with this attack method. After all, didn't a middle heavenly venerables use this method to sweep away all the outstanding heroes? With his invincible speed combined with his golden body of merit, he was almost invincible. Even before he had cultivated the golden body of merit, the middle heavenly venerables had already reached a very high level of physical cultivation. The most shocking battle was when the Moon City Lord, who was at the same level as her, was easily suppressed by the middle heavenly venerables using the speed law. In the face of the middle heavenly venerables' speed, the Moon City Lord had almost no power to fight back. After that, she also studied the methods of the middle heavenly venerables. After all, although they were cooperating, there was also competition. It was inevitable that she would study the others' methods. However, the final conclusion was that there was no way. Unless one's strength was comparable to the middle heavenly venerables, there was really no way to fight back. There were very few heavenly venerables who used the speed law as an attack method, but it was extremely effective. The middle heavenly venerables used this method to dominate the Fortune God dynasty. However, the feeling that Yi Shiwen gave her now was extremely similar to that of a middle heavenly venerate. Similar attack methods, equally tyrannical and invincible, equally powerful and unparalleled, almost imprinted from the same mold. And she wasn't wrong. This was indeed an attack method that Yi Shiwen had created by imitating the attack methods of the middle heavenly venerables. The battle where the middle heavenly venerables easily suppressed the Moon City Lord had shocked Yi Shiwen greatly. He didn't need any martial arts as a carrier. Just the speed law alone could be strong to this extent. Now that he had the same conditions as the middle heavenly venerables, this method wasn't difficult to imitate. When he used it, the power was really earth-shattering. Just one blow was enough to seriously injure three great heavenly venerables. If it wasn't for Hierarch Qin Tian blocking it, he could have directly killed them. The boundless power of the middle heavenly venerables that suppressed the Moon City Lord was directly reproduced. You want to stop me? How is that possible? Yi Shiwen took a step forward. His big foot trampled down like a mountain. The three heavenly venerables who were knocked away by him were instantly trampled to death, their souls scattered. Chapter 3709. Yi Shiwen killed the three heavenly masters of the divine ability era with a single stomp. He did it so effortlessly and easily. If it was before, when Yi Shiwen's cultivation was equivalent to an ordinary peak heavenly master, he might not have been able to do it so easily. But now, he could do it. He turned to look at Hierarch Qin Tian. Hierarch Qingtian instantly felt his whole body tense up as if he was being stared at by a monster. A sense of extreme danger rushed to his head. The West Heavenly Master, who was beside him, was also eyeing him covetously. Although the West Heavenly Master was seriously injured and was no match for him, he was still able to delay him. This made the situation extremely bad for him. The divine ability era is really bold. How dare you chase after my Fortune God Dynasty's West Heavenly Master? I think you are tired of living. Yi Shiwen looked at Hierarch Qingtian and said. Yi Shiwen was now the Fortune God Dynasty's East Heavenly Master. Over time, he was naturally infected with the Fortune God Dynasty's unparalleled domineering aura. Going against the Fortune Divine Dynasty was akin to seeking one's own death, there was no doubt about it. Hierarch Qingtian's expression turned ugly. Finally, the horror of the Fortune Divine Dynasty resurfaced in his mind. In this era, the Fortune Divine Dynasty had set countless terrifying records. Although it wasn't their most glorious time, it wasn't difficult for them to crush the Divine Ability era. He could ignore the West Heavenly Master's words before because the West Heavenly Master was seriously injured and was not his opponent. He was determined to win, so he naturally did not care. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He could not really ignore Yi Shiwen's words. However, he refused to show weakness and said, East Heavenly Master, do you think you can escape this time? You probably don't know who made a move this time, right? Even the martial epoch cannot stop him. The prematurely ending of the martial epoch is already set in stone. Is there anything I don't know? But I do know one thing. Even if my Fortune God Dynasty is destroyed, all of you will still die. I don't know where your courage comes from. Do you really think that you can provoke our Fortune God Dynasty just because you have a few half-step sovereign realm old fogies? The corners of Yi Shiwen's mouth curled into a sneer, and his smile became increasingly indifferent. Over the years, the ancient era could be said to be restless. In particular, some of the more powerful ancient era led by the demonic path era were constantly making small moves. Even Moon City had fallen to their schemes. Now they actually wanted to end the Fortune Divine Dynasty and end the martial epoch in advance. Their methods were getting more and more terrifying, and their goals were getting more and more earth-shattering. As the Eastern Heavenly Venerate of the Fortune God Dynasty, Yi Shiwen had a vested interest in the Fortune God Dynasty and even the entire martial epoch. These people provoking the Fortune God Dynasty was the same as provoking his interest. The Fortune God Dynasty was the foundation of his life, thus he naturally would not give them any face. Fine, it doesn't matter. I'll kill you first, and then find a chance to find your Divine Ability era. I'll destroy the entire Divine Ability era to serve as a warning to others. There are bound to be people who want to make trouble. You should know that it's not the time for the great apocalypse yet. Some people are reaching out too early. Yi Shiwen's tone became more and more indifferent, and his murderous aura became more and more intense. Want to kill me? Impossible. Since Hierarch Qingtian was forced to this point, he certainly could not continue to endure. His aura suddenly sublimated and became many times more terrifying. He pushed his magic power to the limit. Around him, the void twisted and turned into one after another Dao field of mystic arts. These mystic arts all had their own sentience and possessed unimaginable power. Boom! In an instant, he had already made his move. He did not dare to wait for Yi Shiwen to make the first move. Instead, he wanted to make the first move. Only in this way could he compete with Yi Shiwen. Countless divine abilities were used on him. He had already arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. Millions of offensive divine abilities were evolved to the extreme by him. Like a group of shining stars, his figure could not be seen at all, and he did not give Yi Shiwen a chance to react. Bang! This attack directly bombarded Yi Shiwen's body. The space around Yi Shiwen's body could be said to have collapsed in response. Countless magical powers destroyed everything and were utilized to the extreme. Hierarch Qingtian was indeed worthy of being a peak heavenly master. His combat power was completely different from the previous divine ability Heavenly Master. The universe collapsed, the world was annihilated, and time and space were no longer separated. At this time, Yi Shiwen just smiled slightly. His body swayed gently in a mysterious way, and he had completely turned Hierarch Qingtian's attack into nothingness. Hierarch Qingtian's attack could not hurt him at all. How is this possible? Hierarch Qingtian's pupils shrank slightly. He did not hold back in this blow. He had used all his strength. Even West Tianzuan, who was also a peak heavenly master, would have to avoid this blow. Even at his peak, he would not dare to face it head-on. However, not only did Yi Shiwen face it head-on, but he also seemed to be fine. He simply turned his attack into nothingness. Is this all you've got? It's really disappointing. Yi Shiwen's cold voice came out. Suddenly, a shocking ray of light crossed the universe in an instant. Fast, fast, fast. This light was so fast that it instantly penetrated the void of the universe. Even the millions of magical powers that Hierarch Qingtian had arranged around his body were pierced in an instant. This was the ultimate attack method of the Great Way to the simplest. It did not need to be gorgeous. The simpler the attack method was, the harder it was to resist. Puff! This light instantly penetrated Hierarch Qingtian's shoulder. Hierarch Qingtian was sent flying. He only felt that his entire shoulder was blown up, and blood was spurting out. His eyes flashed with a look of horror. Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast. Although he had felt it before, he only understood how fast it was when he faced it head-on. Yi Shiwen was another top master who had advanced the speed law to the time law. Just this speed law alone was enough for Yi Shiwen to be ranked among the peak heavenly masters. However, Yi Shiwen's power was definitely not that simple. Hierarch Qingtian covered his shoulder and panted constantly. He had used all his strength to defend that blow just now. It was extremely exhausting. Although he was unable to defend in the end, it still made him understand the gap between him and Yi Shiwen. He already understood that Yi Shiwen had probably crossed the boundary of peak celestial master and truly touched that domain. That was a realm that he wanted to enter even in his dreams. However, he just couldn't enter it. If one wanted to advance, it was useless to just accumulate martial power. Even if one accumulated the shocking martial power of 10 great apocalypse or more, in the end, one's martial power would only be deeper than the ordinary peak heavenly master. If one couldn't cross it, then one couldn't cross it. In that domain, comprehending was comprehending, and not comprehending was not comprehending. Obviously, Yi Shiwen had comprehended at this time and truly entered that realm. Once he entered that realm, even if they were both in the heavenly master realm, it was equivalent to being in two different worlds. Is the magical power of the magical power era only at this level? It should be more than that. Yi Shiwen stood with his hands behind his back, as if the understated but shocking attack just now was not made by him. There was even a look of exploration on his face, as if he was still very interested in the many means of the magical power era. Hierarch Qingtian's face showed a somewhat embarrassed expression. Yi Shiwen was obviously looking down on him and did not take him seriously. If it was someone else, he would have already beaten the other party to the point that even their mother wouldn't recognize them. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen showed a shocking attack power that made him feel an extreme sense of danger. In a moment, Hierarch Qingtian's injuries had recovered, but he did not breathe a sigh of relief, because he knew that this was because Yi Shiwen let him have his way. Otherwise, how could he recover from his injuries so easily? Not far away, West Heavenly Master also took this opportunity to recover from his injuries. However, his injuries were obviously too serious. Even with his current situation, He could only barely maintain his injuries and prevent them from continuing to worsen. There was no way to make his injuries better. Otherwise, he would have recovered during the process of escaping. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on the two people in the arena. This was a battle between two peak heavenly venerables, especially Yi Shiwen. She had never dreamed that Yi Shiwen, who needed her support in order to gain a foothold in the Heavenly Venerables Convention, had already reached such a level. He had completely surpassed her. He was not on par with her, but had completely surpassed her. She did not know how many adventures Yi Shiwen had in such a short period of time. Since you want to see the magical power of my magical power era, I will satisfy you, Hierarch Qingtian said. His black hair stood up, and each strand was composed of a kind of magical power. This could be said to be very terrifying. There was naturally a reason why he could reach the top of the magical power era. Although he was not born at the peak of the magical power era, but was born after the magical power era had been destroyed, and his cultivation conditions were much worse than the heavenly masters of the magical power era. However, he still reached this step. It was imaginable what kind of genius he was. Such a person naturally had his own pride. Yi Shiwen's completely dismissive attitude had deeply hurt his self-esteem. His eyes flickered with a terrifying light. Countless magical powers were evolving and deducing in his eyes. Almost with the power of one person, he could evolve most of the magical powers of the magical power era. Boom! Countless spiritual power surged in his body, and the light of the magical power law erupted. The blazing light illuminated the entire world. Chapter 37:10. After being forced to this point, Senior God Qingtian no longer had any scruples. These magical powers were condensed together and turned into a terrifying power. Whoosh! Senior God Qingtian made his move. His entire body swept out like a streamer and blasted directly at Yi Shiwen in an instant. Such an attack was simply destructive. Whether it was speed or power, it had reached the extreme. It was driven by magical power. The divine power was matchless and had the momentum of invincibility. It was indeed very tyrannical. Boom! Yi Shiwen's body was surrounded by countless principles. They turned into circles and rolled out in all directions to protect him. It looked like a golden bell. Senior God Qingtian's attack directly left a mark on this golden bell. Countless laws raged and countless magical powers swept out. Yi Shiwen's golden bell was left with traces of cracks. Although the golden bell's defense had not been completely broken, it also gave Senior God Qingtian great hope. After all, Yi Shiwen was not difficult to defeat. There was no possibility of defeating him. God Qingtian's attack paused for a moment, then he pounced on Yi Shiwen again. With a dragon rising and phoenix descending, he directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Countless magical powers were used to protect his body. His physical cultivation was also raised to the peak in an instant. He was very powerful. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen would not just let him attack without fighting back. He also made his move. Whoosh! He disappeared in an instant, instantly disappearing in front of Senior God Qingtian. Senior God Qingtian's eyes changed. There was a mysterious magical light flashing in it. He used the magical power of his eyes to capture Yi Shiwen. Such a magical power had always been successful for him, but in fact it was ineffective against Yi Shiwen because Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast. In an instant, Yi Shiwen had already rushed in front of him. Boom! Senior God Qingtian was directly knocked out. He only felt that his whole body was about to fall apart. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At this time, he really felt how terrible it was to be hit by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was too strong. After raising his speed to the extreme, he really had the means to look down on all the heroes in the world. Boom! Boom! Bang! After falling into a disadvantageous position, Great God Qingtian was not discouraged. He even took the initiative to attack, because he knew that this was his only hope. If not, there was no possibility of him defeating Yi Shiwen. Both sides battled deep into the void, and the shock waves and terrifying attacks even attracted many law entities from the depths of the void. However, although those law entities had been entrusted with the mission of guarding Saint Absolute Heaven's tomb, it did not mean that they had no intelligence. They were also afraid when they saw a battle of this level. If they were in Saint Absolute Heaven's shoes, they might not even need to use any powerful technique. Just the shock waves of the battle alone would be enough to severely injure them or even kill them instantly. Pooh! Senior God Qingtian spat out a mouthful of blood. He was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. His figure kept retreating. In the series of attacks just now, he suffered a great loss. He could only forcibly suppress his injuries with great magical power to support himself from being directly defeated. Even so, dense cracks appeared on his body. They were injured by Yi Shiwen's terrifying strength when they were fighting. Only now did he understand that Yi Shiwen's physique cultivation was unfathomable compared to Yi Shiwen's shocking speed. In fact, it had already reached an incredible level. The strength of Meritorious Tyrant form was undoubtedly the embodiment of Yi Shiwen's strength. Although there were layers of magical power protection, he was still seriously injured. There was nothing he could do. It was already very difficult for him to be able to hold on until now. In terms of absolute strength, he might not be inferior to Yi Shiwen. He did not know how many tens of thousands of years he had cultivated compared to Yi Shiwen. However, in terms of the same power control, he was far inferior to Yi Shiwen. He was beaten to the point of retreating step by step, and was completely at a disadvantage. The surface of his body began to ooze blood. His expression became more bitter. He thought in his heart, "I can't go on like this. If this continues, I will be beaten to death by him." He already felt that in this aspect, he was too far behind Yi Shiwen. Even if Yi Shiwen did not want to kill him immediately, he would still be beaten to death by Yi Shiwen if this series of battles continued. There was no other possibility. Almost in the next moment, Senior God Qingtian already had an idea. He retreated tens of thousands of miles to avoid Yi Shiwen's attack range. He did not want to escape. Just from the situation just now, he could see that Yi Shiwen's speed was much faster than his. It was impossible to escape in front of Yi Shiwen at this time. Huff, huff, huff. Hierarch Qingtian panted heavily. He looked a little tired, but his fighting spirit was burning fiercely. "I must delay the time until the others arrive. Maybe they can besiege and kill this guy. If I am alone, it will be a problem for me to protect myself." At this time, he was no longer thinking about how to kill Yi Shiwen because he also knew that it was impossible. The best he could do was to protect himself. "Eastern Lord, you are really too much of a bully." Senior God Qingtian looked up to the sky and roared, "Do you really think that your Fortune God dynasty can cover the sky with one hand? Our magical era is not to be trifled with." Senior God Qingtian muttered and pinched a seal. In an instant, the laws of the world suddenly became active. He was going to use his trump card. Although this was not the best time to use his trump card, he had no other choice. If he did not make a move now, he was afraid that he would not have a chance in the future. "I will let you see the power of our magical era." On his body, countless mystic arts turned into rays of rainbow light that gathered in the sky. They were colorful like rainbows, but they were even more colorful than rainbows. These rainbow lights condensed together in the sky and turned into a huge door. This door was condensed from countless magical powers. Around this door, countless spells circled around it like fairies, bringing with them an extremely terrifying power. Magical Gate. Eastern Lord, be careful. This is the magical era's secret technique. It is very powerful. Western Lord saw it and quickly reminded. She had already recognized the origin of this huge door and knew the power of this magical gate. "It doesn't matter. Watch him smash it. Yi Shiwen's expression finally became serious. Senior God Qingtian finally used his full strength. This magical gate was the supreme magical power of the magical era. Even in the magical era, it was rare to master this magical gate. Therefore, this was also the first time that Yi Shiwen had come across the gate of magical powers. He had only learned some information about the magical powers era on paper. However, he could feel it now. It seemed as if this gate of magical powers had gathered the power of all the magical powers in the world. It was impossible to calculate exactly how many divine abilities there were in this world, let alone the different divine abilities that had evolved from different eras. When all of these were condensed together, it was an extremely terrifying torrent. Die! Hierarch Qingtian roared. The gate of divinity slowly pressed down. The sky shattered inch by inch. Even though this was the tomb of sage Zhu Tian, it was still crushed by him. One could imagine how terrifying this gate of divinity was. Western Lord suddenly felt great pressure. Although this magical gate was aimed at Yi Shiwen, he had no doubt that the next person to be suppressed by the magical gate would be none other than Yi Shiwen if Yi Shiwen couldn't hold on. Therefore, he had to remind Yi Shiwen to be careful and not fall into the trap. Yi Shiwen also felt a huge pressure in an instant. However, he was awe-inspiring and fearless. His body exuded endless golden light. It was the golden light of virtue. As soon as the golden light of virtue brushed past, that intense pressure instantly disappeared. Then, he clenched his fist and blasted out fiercely. His long arm blasted out like a long dragon, piercing through the world and the universe, annihilating everything. In the sky, two terrifying forces that could destroy heaven and earth seethed and rushed towards each other. In the sky, the law creatures couldn't help but feel numb when they saw this scene. What a heaven-defying method! Both of these forces could destroy heaven and earth. The only difference was that Senior God Qingtian was obviously doing his best. Boom! Finally, these two terrifying forces collided. The terrifying force annihilated time and space. The stalemate lasted for a while. Then, cracks appeared on the divine ability gate one after another. The huge divine ability gate completely collapsed, inch by inch in front of countless pairs of eyes. Yi Shiwen's fist pierced through the gate of the magical ability. This punch was unparalleled. Its momentum didn't decrease, and it directly blasted on Senior God Qingtian's body. Boom! This punch was too strong. Senior God Qingtian was directly hit, and his body exploded. The Holy Lord's blood and bones flew everywhere. He was seriously injured with just one punch. He wasn't a match for Yi Shiwen at all. Yi Shiwen, who didn't hold back, displayed his terrifying strength. Senior God Qingtian intended to reform his body, but Yi Shiwen obviously wouldn't give him this opportunity. A gung-metal long blade appeared in his hand. With just one slash, Senior God Qingtian's spirit was completely destroyed and turned into nothingness. Chapter 37:11. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact, it only took a short moment. The winner and loser of the two sides had already been determined. Experts of the Holy Master level could fight thousands of times in an instant. When there was a huge gap in strength between the two sides, the winner and loser would be determined in a very short time. On the side, the Western Venerable was dazzled. Yi Shiwen had killed the celestial venerables of the magical ability era who were chasing him with lightning speed. The celestial venerables of the magical ability era didn't even have the power to fight back. If Yi Shiwen didn't want to see the means of the magical ability era, it would be even more impossible to stop Yi Shiwen. From the beginning to the end, Yi Shiwen had shown a crushing advantage. The Western Venerable's beautiful eyes had a complicated expression. Looking at Yi Shiwen like this, it was the rhythm of another Middle Celestial Master emerging. The Middle Celestial Master could successfully advance from Eastern Celestial Master to Middle Celestial Master. In addition to making great contributions that were irrefutable, the Middle Celestial Master's strength was the last straw to suppress everything. This was different from Yi Shiwen's promotion to Eastern Celestial Master. Yi Shiwen's promotion to Eastern Celestial Master would at most be on equal footing with them. Although they were a little unhappy, it was not unacceptable. Moreover, everyone thought that even if Yi Shiwen was promoted to Eastern Celestial Master, he would be behaving with his tail between his legs for a long time. He was just a 7th Realm Celestial Master. It was unknown how long it would take for him to be on equal footing with them. However, the Middle Celestial Master was different. The Middle Celestial Master was the leader of the 5 Great Celestial Masters. He was also the deputy ruler of the Fortune God dynasty and had all the power. This was an existence that was superior to them. How could they be convinced under ordinary circumstances? However, it was the battle where the Middle Celestial Master suppressed the City Lord of Moon City with thunderous momentum that made them understand the gap between them. The Middle Celestial Master had already explored that realm. Since ancient times, many peak Celestial Masters had been born in the Fortune God dynasty. Especially when the Fortune God Lord was still in power, there were many experts and fierce generals. There were many peak Celestial Masters. But those that could touch that barrier and surpass the peak Empyrean could be counted on one hand. With such strength as a foundation, there was no doubt that the Middle Empyrean position would be theirs. Empyrean spacetime could only obediently leave for Moon City. The Heavenly Venerables in the Eastern region didn't dare to give Yi Shiwen any face. They dared to provoke Yi Shiwen, but they didn't give him any face. There were many open and veiled struggles in the dark. However, they absolutely didn't dare to go against the Middle Heavenly Venerables. This was the absolute prestige brought about by absolute strength. To put it bluntly, the root of everything in this world was strength. However, Yi Shiwen had risen at an astonishing speed. He had caught up with them and had even surpassed them. It looked like the next Middle Empyrean was about to appear. Judging from the strength that Yi Shiwen had displayed, apart from the Middle Heavenly Master, the 4 Heavenly Masters of the North, South, East, and West would be led by the Eastern Heavenly Master. It didn't matter even if his qualifications were too low, even if he had just become an Eastern Heavenly Venerable, even if his foundation wasn't that solid. Yi Shiwen's strength surpassed everyone else's, and that was enough. However, in an instant, the Western Heavenly Venerable had already thought of many things. Similarly, she seemed to have accepted the current situation. In the end, the Western Heavenly Venerable said, "I didn't expect you to grow to this point in such a short period of time." Although the Western Heavenly Venerable was shrewd, her face still showed an envious look. Who didn't know that realm? Not to mention the hardships of the previous cultivation, they had already tried to break through countless times after entering the peak Heavenly Venerable, but they had never succeeded. However, among them, the Middle Heavenly Venerable was the first to surpass everyone. Now, there was a younger generation like Yi Shiwen who had overtaken them and surpassed all of them. Even her mind couldn't help but have a thought. If the Eastern Heavenly Venerable and the Middle Heavenly Venerable were to fight, who would win in the end? Both of them had touched the existence of that level, surpassing the ordinary peak Heavenly Venerables. However, who would be stronger? "I was just lucky," Yi Shiwen said with a slight smile. He wasn't too arrogant. This time's comprehension was not only the result of the previous blowout of accumulation, but also the help of the mysterious space. The most important thing was a little luck. If he was given another chance, he might not be able to succeed. However, in the end, he still stood in that domain. He stood in that domain. You must be joking. I don't believe in luck. I only believe that this is caused by strength, said the Western Heavenly Venerable with a slight smile. As she spoke, she suddenly coughed violently and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Cough, cough, cough. The pretty face of the Western Heavenly Venerable instantly turned pale. It was obvious that the injuries on her body couldn't be suppressed anymore. The previous battle with the sky-gazing Divine Master had also made her already serious injuries even more serious. However, at this moment, a crying phoenix flew directly into her body and turned into a warm current that began to heal the injuries on her body. After a while, the Western Heavenly Venerable's complexion finally improved. There was some color on her pretty chubby face. She wasn't as pale as before. She also stopped coughing. Obviously, the injuries on her body were also contained. At least, it wasn't as terrifying as it was at the beginning. "Thank you, friend," said the Western Heavenly Venerable after calming down her breathing. She knew that if it wasn't for Yi Shiwen's help this time, she didn't know how long it would take for her to recover. "You're welcome. It's nothing." Yi Shiwen shook his head and said, "I would like to ask, with friend's strength, who could injure you to this extent?" He was very puzzled. With the strength of the Fortune God dynasty, although they weren't invincible in the world, it was more than enough to protect themselves. Even if they were facing the joint siege of other ancient eras, they shouldn't end up in such a miserable state. Not to mention that they had the support of the Middle Heavenly Venerable. No matter how he looked at it, this matter was extraordinary. It was a young man. I haven't seen him before. He was very strong. I was seriously injured after only one move from him. Not only me, but even the Middle Heavenly Venerable was seriously injured. Then we were separated. A look of horror flashed in the Western Heavenly Venerable's eyes. Thinking of the scene at that time, even someone as strong as him felt like trembling. It wasn't that they were too weak. On the contrary, that person was too strong. He was so strong that they couldn't resist at all. "One move," said Yi Shiwen with a slight frown. If he was fully prepared and the Western Heavenly Venerable was unprepared, it wasn't completely impossible to injure the Middle Heavenly Venerable. However, to injure the Middle Heavenly Venerable seriously was not something he could do. He and the Middle Heavenly Venerable were now at most on par. Even if he was confident that he was a little stronger than the Middle Heavenly Venerable, it was only a little. Who was this person? However, he instantly thought of a few words and said, "Is he a half-step dominator?" asked Yi Shiwen. With the strength of the Middle Heavenly Venerable and the others, even if they encountered a similar top master, they wouldn't necessarily be able to seriously injure or kill him. There was only one possibility, and that was those old monsters of the half-step dominator. Those people were too strong. If Yi Shiwen, the Middle Heavenly Venerable, Demon Venerable Luoho, and the others had only touched that realm, then the half-step dominator had one foot in that realm. They had become incomparably terrifying and powerful. It was not surprising that they had such terrifying strength. "It should be a half-step dominator." West Heavenly Venerable nodded. "To be able to seriously injure and scatter us in one move, I can't think of anyone else besides that old guy of the half-step dominator level. However, that person is too young. Although he can maintain his youthful appearance, there is no way to conceal his aura. Therefore, I am certain that that person must have been born in this era. However, he might be a little older than me. It's just that I have never seen him before, so I don't know who he is." After saying that, the Western Heavenly Venerate also felt a little helpless. After all, this world was just too big and the number of ancient eras was uncountable. Not to mention, they had no idea how many top experts had been born during those eras. Only those who had opposed them all year round were likely to be known by them. Some old monsters who were hidden very deeply were not even known by them. In the end, the foundation of the Fortune God dynasty was still too shallow compared to those ancient eras. Other things were fine, but when it came to such matters, the powerlessness of the Fortune God dynasty would be highlighted. A half-step dominator can be born in this era? Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be shocked. Not to mention those ancient eras. Although some people might have stepped into the half-step dominator realm, they were born in several eras before the Great Apocalypse. They couldn't be considered as half-step dominators born in this era. Without a doubt, the half-step sovereigns born in this era were all the essence of heaven and earth. They were the favored children of heaven and earth. Since ancient times, such characters could be counted on one hand. They could be counted on one hand, and the fortune heavenly monarch was one of them. In the past, the fortune god monarch was an outstanding figure among these half-step dominators. Later, he successfully broke through to the sovereign realm in a battle with the Chaos Overlord, becoming the ruler of the entire fortune god dynasty and the fortune world. He was famous and invincible. Since ancient times, the number of half-step dominator experts could be counted on one hand. In the process of fighting with the fortune god monarch, they were killed one after another by the fortune god monarch. Currently, they only knew that the primal chaos overlord existed. Everyone knew that the primal chaos overlord was being suppressed in the divine capital of creation, so that person definitely couldn't be the primal chaos overlord. Moreover, did the West Heavenly Venerable not know the chaos overlord? That was also impossible. Then, who was that person? In other words, he wasn't a half-step dominator born in the fortune world. That was even more shocking. Chapter 37:12. Everyone knew that the biggest difference between the current era and the ancient era was that the ancient era was on the decline, while the current era was like a blazing sun in the sky, unimaginably powerful. Only in the current epoch could such an extreme genius be born. In the ancient epoch, it was very difficult for the masters born in the current epoch to even step into the Empyrean realm. Even a peak heavenly venerable like Heavenly Talisman Immortal Venerable was a life-form born before the great cataclysm of the Talisman Tao epoch. After cultivating for several epochs, he finally stepped into the peak heavenly venerable realm. Just like that, the Heaven Talisman Immortal was already considered an outstanding figure among the countless creatures of the ancient era. Under the situation where the heavenly law was incomplete and even the era was heading towards destruction, she could still enter the ranks of the peak heavenly master realm. From this, it could be seen that she was a genius. It was also because of this that in the current era, those ancient eras could actually give birth to a half-step sovereign-level figure. This was simply inconceivable. One had to know, in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, this kind of character was as rare as a phoenix feather or a Chilan horn. These people were not Hotian living beings, but were innate divine spirit. They were born with the mission to bring prosperity to this era, which was why they could quickly reach the peak of heavenly venerable realm, and even step into the half-step sovereign realm. Among them, the fortune god monarch was even more outstanding. He was extraordinary from birth and shocked the world when he was born. Later on, he rose at an astonishing speed. These people were favored by the world's destiny and were born with a special mission. In contrast, Yi Shiwen, who was born after birth, simply couldn't be compared with them. In order to cultivate to the same level as them, Yi Shiwen had to pay a much higher price than them. This is impossible. Yi Shiwen's first reaction was disbelief. However, he believed in the West Heavenly Master's vision. With the West Heavenly Master's identity, it was impossible for him to make such a mistake. If even she did not do anything, then this person might really be low-key to the point of being terrifying. However, the appearance of such a powerful expert here was undoubtedly the worst situation for them. But if it is an expert born in this era, then his lifespan will be unimaginably long. Even if the great apocalypse occurs 10 more times, it won't affect him. Why is he so anxious? Yi Shiwen thought to himself. Before coming here, he had already thought about the possibility of being ambushed by those old half-step sovereigns. This was very normal. Those old fellows would not just watch or send others to search for him. This was a matter of life and death. They should know very well that there was a great terror between life and death. It was normal for them to personally take action. Therefore, Yi Shiwen did not dare to relax even for a moment. By now, the entire chaotic universe knew that the ancient epoch's half-step ruler antiques were planning to kill the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. Most likely, only those antiques would show up here at this time. It was impossible for the others to participate rashly because whether at the alliance of the ancient era or the heavenly dynasty, the fortune of the ancient era, the heavenly ancient era, and the sovereigns of the era and the era, if they recklessly interfered, it was very likely that they would die without a burial place. Whether it was the fortune divine dynasty or those half-step sovereign realm old monsters who stood in their way, they would not be lenient. Hence, if this youth was a half-step ruler, he might be one of the half-step rulers who worked together to kill the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. That was the most troublesome part. Compared to those old half-step rulers, these young half-step rulers were the most ambitious. They were the most difficult to deal with. They were at their peak, and they weren't on the same level as those old antique. I haven't figured it out yet, but from what I heard just now, I'm afraid that he isn't just a mere follower. He might even be the one behind the scenes. West Heavenly Venerate seemed to have thought of something and said, "That's the most frightening part. He was born in this era, but he has already cultivated to the half-step ruler realm. He must want to go further and cultivate to the ruler realm in one go to replicate the miracle of the fortune divine monarch." Hearing West Heavenly Venerate's words, Yi Shiwen felt that the situation had become even more troublesome. If it was just a group of old monsters who had reached the end of their lifespans and wanted to fight to the death, although it was troublesome, it was not impossible to deal with them. But if it involved a half-step ruler realm expert who was born in this era, then it would be truly frightening. They were strong enough, had enough time, and had enough patience. Once they made a move, it could be a thunderous blow. In fact, in this era, the only ruler-level character to be born was the fortune creation heavenly monarch. The other half-step rulers had either died or been suppressed by the fortune creation heavenly monarch. So far, there was no news of anyone succeeding. The young half-step ruler realm expert that the West Heavenly Venerate mentioned was likely to replicate such a miracle. Moreover, it was obvious that he was not from the fortune divine dynasty. Otherwise, he would not have used such an extreme method as destroying the martial epoch in exchange for the possibility of advancing further. Because if he was a half-step heavenly venerate of the martial epoch was their foundation. The destruction of the martial epoch would not benefit them at all. No matter who it is, let's find the middle heavenly venerate first, Yi Shiwen said. That person should have already left. Yes, he has already left. It seems that he doesn't care about us at all. He directly entered the depths of the absolute heaven sage's tomb. When he left in a hurry, as if he was in a hurry. He was very anxious, so he only injured us and scattered us before leaving, West Heavenly Venerate said. Thinking of this, he still felt some lingering fear. If not for that young half-step ruler realm looking down on them, they would not have been able to escape this time. That person was simply too terrifying. That one strike had seriously injured a group of them, displaying a terrifying strength that completely surpassed that of a heavenly venerate. That's good. From the situation on your side, I can guess that the middle heavenly venerate and the others are probably being chased by others. We have to find them quickly, Yi Shiwen said. Yes. West Heavenly Venerate nodded and said, now that the middle heavenly venerate was the vice-ruler of the fortune divine dynasty, they could not afford to be injured like this. Most importantly, they needed the middle heavenly venerate to take charge of the fight against those old half-step rulers. Everyone else could die, but the middle heavenly venerate could not. The two of them quickly turned into a beam of light and directly entered the world of the tomb. At this time, the entire tomb of Sage Absolute Heaven was in a state of chaos. The heavenly venerates of various ancient eras and the law lifeforms that had followed behind had started a great battle. Without Yi Shiwen blocking and attracting the firepower, the number of law life forms that had entered Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb had increased significantly. It was just that Yi Shiwen had previously blocked a considerable number of law life forms with his own strength. Now that they were all free, the heavenly venerates from the ancient eras could not help but complain incessantly. They were not as strong as Yi Shiwen, who could single-handedly beat these law life forms to the point where they could not even get close to him. However, they were also unwilling to leave just like that. After all, this was Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb, and there were many good things left behind. Even if they could not obtain the legendary inheritance of Sage Absolute Heaven, even a random thing that had leaked out would be enough for these ordinary heavenly venerates to recoup their losses. A fierce battle broke out at any moment. Countless law life forms died at the hands of these heavenly venerates, but many of these heavenly venerates also died under the siege of the law life forms. These heavenly venerates were very powerful, and a single law life form was not a match for them. However, when there were too many law life forms, they still died without a burial place. Under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen and the Western Heavenly Venerate began to search for the heavenly venerates of the Fortune God dynasty. After a full day and night, they finally found those heavenly venerates one after another. They had also been scattered and severely injured. They had been ambushed by the experts of the magical era, the ghost era and the devil path era. From time to time, they would also have to face the experts of other ancient eras. After all, the Fortune God dynasty was now the public enemy. Almost all of these eras had fought with the Fortune God dynasty, so they could be considered enemies. The only difference was the degree of hatred. Under such circumstances, it had only been slightly more than a day, and half of them had actually died. This time, it could be said that the losses were disastrous. These were all high-level heavenly venerates of the 7th realm and above. If this had happened in the Fortune God dynasty's territory, even the death of any one of them would have been a huge matter. The world would be shaken, and countless living beings would weep. But now they had died just like that, without a sound. The remaining half were already on the verge of death. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen and the Western Heavenly Venerate appeared at the most critical moment and saved them from the brink of death. In particular, Yi Shiwen had displayed shocking combat strength during the rescue process. With his strength alone, he had suppressed these heavenly venerates of the ancient eras to the point where they could not breathe at all. Because he had to seize the time to save people, this time, Yi Shiwen did not stop at all. Often, as soon as he attacked, it would not take long for these heavenly venerates of the ancient eras to be completely annihilated. They did not even have the strength to fight back, and not a single one could escape. But even so, half of them did not wait for Yi Shiwen's rescue during the process and died. After saving them, Yi Shiwen arranged for the Western Heavenly Venerate to protect them, while he directly went to the entrance of Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb. Middle Heavenly Venerate and Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerate were trapped inside. Chapter 37:13. From the other Heavenly Venerables, Yi Shiwen learned that the Middle Heavenly Venerables and the others were trapped at the entrance of Sage Monarch Absolute Heaven's tomb. In other words, they were ambushed by the mysterious half-step sovereign. After Yi Shiwen stayed behind to bring up the rear, they quickly found the entrance to Sage Monarch Absolute Heaven's tomb. At the same time, experts from the Devil Dao era, Divine Ability era, and Ghost Dao era also arrived. A huge battle broke out at this entrance. Although the Fortune God dynasty was besieged by the other ancient eras, these ancient eras had their own ulterior motives. Even if they worked together, they couldn't be wholeheartedly. They were afraid that they would be used as the first bird to stand out and exhaust the Fortune God dynasty's strength. Therefore, the battle that should have ended without any suspense was delayed. Although the Fortune God dynasty was surrounded, they weren't in too much danger. Although they were at a disadvantage, overall, they weren't in too much danger. At this rate, they would be able to delay entering the tomb. At that time, they might have a chance to snatch Sage Monarch Absolute Heaven's inheritance. This was also the Middle Heavenly Venerable's plan. Right now, they were being targeted. As long as they could survive this, the rest would be much easier. But at that time, the mysterious young half-step sovereign expert appeared. He almost injured them with his own strength. If the Middle Heavenly Venerables hadn't released the Fortune Universe Scrolls projection at the crucial moment to protect them, they wouldn't have been able to survive. It wouldn't have been as simple as being heavily injured or scattered. They would most likely have been beaten to death. After that, the half-step sovereign expert left and entered the tomb's entrance. The Middle Heavenly Venerables and Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerables were still trapped here, unable to advance or retreat. After learning this news, Yi Shiwen immediately rushed over. Although this world was huge, and the laws also restricted many Heavenly Venerables' ability to travel through space and time, he quickly arrived at the tomb's entrance in the center of this tomb world. Before he even got close, there were countless storms of laws sweeping over. This was the terrifying might of a battle between peak experts. Yi Shiwen opened his heaven's eye, and saw that a dozen figures were engaged in a fierce battle at the entrance of the tomb. Generally speaking, they were divided into two battlefields. One of them was slightly smaller in number, but it occupied the majority of the battlefield. The person in the center of this battlefield was none other than the Middle Empyrean. At this time, the Middle Empyrean's clothes were in tatters, blood was flying everywhere, and his hair was flying. There was a huge bloody hole in his chest, making him look fierce and terrifying. The entire battlefield was filled with his silhouette. The law of speed was unleashed to the extreme. Each time, he could shatter the void and annihilate everything. Even so, this powerful Middle Empyrean was still trapped in midair, unable to escape. Because around him, there were three figures in a triangular formation, firmly locking him in. And the leader was none other than Demon Venerable Luoho. In addition to Demon Venerable Luoho, there were two other experts. Yi Shiwen had seen these two before. One was a top expert of the Ghost Era, and the other was a peak Heavenly Venerable of the Magical Era. He was even stronger than God Qingtian, who was killed by Yi Shiwen. His cultivation was probably not below the Middle Empyrean. The cultivation of these three people was not inferior to the Middle Empyrean. Now, the three of them had joined forces and surrounded the Middle Empyrean, not letting him escape. The tyrannical speed attack that the Middle Empyrean was so proud of didn't have any effect in front of these three people. These three people were just too strong. Any one of them could leave their name in the annals of history. They were invincible. However, the three of them did not force the Heavenly Venerate. Instead, they firmly suppressed the Middle Heavenly Venerate. Although the Middle Heavenly Venerate had been seriously injured and was no longer at his peak, he was still a top-notch expert. Killing him would not be easy. They could join forces to kill the Middle Empyrean, but at the same time, they had to pay a sufficient price. Such a price was not willing to pay. As long as they could safely kill the Middle Empyrean, there was no need to pay such a price. The three people were too strong. The Middle Empyrean could not break out of the encirclement no matter how hard he tried. This time, the three great ancient eras were determined to kill the Middle Empyrean. The revenge of the Fortune God dynasty would be a matter for a long time in the future. Moreover, in their opinion, this time, the Fortune God dynasty would not be able to escape. On the other battlefield, there were many more people, but they could only occupy a corner of the battlefield. Compared to the battle of the four Heavenly Venerables on the other side, it was much worse. And at the center of this battlefield was none other than Heaven Talisman Immortal. At this time, Heaven Talisman Immortal was like a blazing sun, incomparably dazzling. Almost with her own strength, she suppressed the top experts of the other 8 ancient eras. These 8 Heavenly Venerables were also top experts from the Ghost Dao era, Divine Ability era, and Devil Dao era respectively. Among them, there were 3 peak heavenly venerables, and the remaining 5 were experts of the 7th, 8th, and 9th realm. These experts also surrounded Heaven Talisman Immortal, but they were also suppressed by Heaven Talisman Immortal. At this time, Heaven Talisman Immortal looked incomparably powerful, as if there was no opponent in the world who could match her. However, Yi Shiwen could see that Heavenly Talisman Immortal Venerable was clearly an arrow at the end of its flight. She had overdrawn too much of her life source. She was like a sun that was madly burning herself to erupt with formidable fighting strength. A peak heavenly venerate fighting for thousands or even tens of thousands of years would not feel their magic power drying up. But with Heaven Talisman Immortal situation, burning her life source to this extent, she might not last long. After all, her strength was limited. Facing 3 experts of the same level as her was already very strenuous, not to mention there were 5 high-level heavenly venerables resisting outside. This seemed like a stupid method, but in fact, she had no other choice. Burning her life source might only last for a few days. If she didn't burn her life source, she might not even last for a day before being seriously injured by these experts. These people also had no intention of attacking forcefully. They could also see that although Heaven Talisman Immortal looked like she was suppressing the world, she would weaken sooner or later, and they might not even need to do anything. This was the fundamental reason why the 2 battlefields could be in a stalemate until now. The experts of the 3 great eras were not willing to pay a huge price, because it would be taken advantage of by others, and it was even possible for them to be assassinated. Although the 3 great eras were cooperating, it was not a day or 2 since ancient times. There was also a blood feud between them, and it was unknown how many experts had fallen in the hands of each other. Suddenly, Heaven Talisman Immortal, who had just displayed her might and slaughtered everyone, spat out a mouthful of blood. In an instant, her pretty face turned snow-white, and her monstrous aura disappeared without a trace, as though the terrifying aura that made everyone breathless was just an illusion. Everyone's expression turned cold. They knew that the opportunity they had been waiting for had finally arrived. The opportunity to finish off Heaven Talisman Immortal in one go had arrived. In particular, the few heavenly venerates from the Demon Dao era were even more excited. The Talisman Dao era had been destroyed by the Demon Dao era, but Heaven Talisman Immortal, who was the only remaining expert of the Talisman Dao era, was still alive. On the contrary, she had continued to sneak attack the experts of the Demon Dao era. Although she was not a match for Demon Venerate Luo Ho, she was simply invincible against ordinary heavenly venerates. Given her peak heavenly venerate strength, the number of heavenly venerates that could stop her could be counted on one hand. After she put down her pride, she became extremely terrifying, which gave the Demon Dao era a headache. However, they had not been able to catch Heaven Talisman Immortal's shadow. Now they finally had a chance to eradicate this future trouble. After all, it was not easy to nurture every heavenly venerate in the Demon Dao era. They could not just die like this. At this critical moment, a 7th realm Ghost Dao era heavenly venerate reacted first. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. It could even be said that he had been aiming for this opportunity all along. Countless mournful wails turned into terrifying sound waves. Immediately after, this Ghost Dao era heavenly venerate charged forward. Only now could one see that this Ghost Dao era heavenly venerate had a repulsive appearance. He looked like a ferocious ghost with a green face and fangs. Anyone who saw him from afar would feel terrified. At that moment, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerate was powerless to resist. Although her cultivation realm and strength were much higher than this Ghost Path era's heavenly venerate, she was already in a desperate situation after continuously burning her life source. Her body was in so much pain that she couldn't even raise her hand to resist. This was the price of burning her life source. Even a peak heavenly venerate would not dare to burn their life source for a long time, let alone for several days straight. they would have already overdrawn their life source. Hand over your life source. This seventh realm ghost Tao era heavenly venerate charged towards Heaven Talisman Immortal and burst out with sharp ghostly wails. However, before he could launch an attack, he saw a white palm that seemed to have pierced through space. It pierced through him in one move and crushed his divine soul. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerate spat out another mouthful of blood. Although she had killed that ghost Tao era heavenly venerate with that attack, she had also exhausted the last of her strength. Just one attack had caused her injuries to worsen to an extreme degree. The remaining 7 heavenly venerates exchanged glances and said, "Go, she is already an arrow at the end of its flight. She won't be able to use that attack a second time." An 8th realm ghost Tao era heavenly venerate took the lead and charged forward. The life source of a peak heavenly venerate was enough to make up for all his losses. Bang! A blade light slashed down from the sky. That terrifying might split the sky and earth in half. The 8th realm ghost Tao era heavenly venerate was instantly killed and turned into a bloody mist. Everyone was shocked. Chapter 37:14. Everyone was stunned. What kind of situation was this? They originally thought that they could easily kill Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable, who was already at the end of her tether. This was also their plan from the start, which was to surround and kill Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. But now, problems kept arising. First, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable had a sudden burst of divine might and killed a 7th realm Heavenly Venerable by surprise. Originally, this wasn't a big deal, as everyone knew that this was her final burst of brilliance. Such a peerless attack wouldn't happen a second time. Sacrificing a 7th realm Heavenly Venerable to kill a peak Heavenly Venerable was worth it no matter how one looked at it, especially since the one who died wasn't them. Moreover, they could obtain too much from Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. They simply couldn't imagine how much wealth, inheritance, and secrets a peak Heavenly Venerable had. However, just as they were rejoicing, another accident occurred. Another 8th realm divine ability Epic Heavenly Venerable died tragically, killed by a saber light. If the Ghost Epic's Heavenly Venerate had been caught off guard because he had been too close, then this blade light was too horrifying. This was because even they did not know where the saber light had come from. In other words, if it were them, they probably wouldn't be able to dodge this saber light either. This saber light was too stunning. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable opened her eyes. The expected death didn't come. It was as if what happened just now was just a dream. However, the tearing sensation in every cell in her body told her that everything that happened just now wasn't a dream, but reality. She was indeed besieged by many experts and nearly died. This was the most dangerous battle she had ever experienced in her life, even more tragic than the battle with Demon Venerable Luoho. At that time, she still had the supreme ancestral symbol Tiger God and could escape. Although Demon Venerable Luoho attacked her, Demon Venerable Luoho's main focus was on dealing with the Talisman Epic's Heavenly Tao. Now he was trapped here, surrounded by 3 peak Heavenly Venerables and 5 Heavenly Venerables. These 8 great Empyreans formed a massive net to swallow her up. She was forced to sublimate her own combat strength and burn her own life source. However, she also knew that this would only buy her some time. It would be very difficult for her to obtain victory. Those Empyreans were not ordinary people. Moreover, she was at a complete disadvantage in terms of numbers. However, just as she was about to give up all hope, a saber light descended from the sky and killed the 8th level Heavenly Venerate from the Mystic Ability era. The style of that saber was too amazing. It was like the first ray of light in the world, illuminating everything and tearing apart the darkness. Just as everyone was dumbfounded, a figure descended from the sky, stepping on a sky full of golden lotuses. Martial Eminence! Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable was in disbelief. At her most dangerous moment, when she was in danger, it was Yi Shiwen who rescued her from the brink of death. Just like that time, this was the second time. Are you all right? Yi Shiwen said casually. It was as if the shocking act of killing a celestial master with a single slash wasn't done by him. I'm fine, but if you came a little later, it's hard to say. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood and said. However, it could be seen that she was in a good mood and still had the mood to joke. As soon as her voice fell, a fiery red phoenix flew into her body. After a single cry, she immediately felt a lot better. Her physical body, which was on the verge of collapse, was also stabilized. Although it was not completely better, at least it did not continue to deteriorate. It could be said that Yi Shiwen casually stopped the deterioration of her injuries. His skill was clearly much stronger than before. She was also stunned. She did not know what kind of fortuitous encounter Yi Shiwen had. He actually improved again. It was obvious that a peak Empyrean had improved a step. At this moment she was very gratified. She did not misjudge Yi Shiwen. Back then, she put all her hopes on Yi Shiwen. Now it turned out that her thoughts were not wrong. Yi Shiwen was indeed not an ordinary person. In such a short time, he actually possessed the strength to be on equal footing with demon Venerable Luo Ho. This was probably something that no one expected. It's you. At this moment, the Empyrean Immortal Venerable surrounding Heaven Talisman Immortal were stunned. They did not expect Yi Shiwen to appear here. Of course, they knew of Yi Shiwen's existence. It was just that Yi Shiwen did not appear in the past 2 days. So, they all thought that Yi Shiwen would not appear. Whether he had died or was delayed by something, Yi Shiwen should not be able to come. But at the most crucial moment, when they were about to succeed, he appeared and ruined their efforts. In order to kill Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable, they resisted and did not make a move. Now their plan was ruined. Yes, it's me. You guys are really bold. Yi Shiwen shouted. Suddenly, a terrifying frenzy swept out. The entire battlefield trembled under his terrifying aura. Countless Tao patterns emerged. They were the unique Tao patterns in Sage Absolute Heaven's tomb. In order to ensure that the entire tomb did not collapse, they emerged and locked the space so that it would not collapse instantly. Pada! Under Yi Shiwen's terrifying aura, these Empyrean Immortal Venerable who surrounded the two of them took a step back. They were frightened by Yi Shiwen's aura. So, they took a step back unconsciously. They only felt that Yi Shiwen was an extremely terrifying beast. Then, a feeling of shame surged in their hearts. As dignified Empyrean Immortal Venerable, they were all high-level Empyrean Immortal Venerable, and even peak Empyrean Immortal Venerable. They actually took a step back because of someone's shout. Although it was not much, if it was spread out, they would still be a huge laughingstock. These people's expressions started to become extremely unfriendly. Their eyes were filled with killing intent as they looked at Yi Shiwen. They could not wait to kill Yi Shiwen immediately to make fun of their shame. Eastern Tianzuan, you're here. Be careful, they've planned this from the start. If anything goes wrong, you should leave on your own. We can't let 3 of us die here. If that happens, the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty will collapse. The Middle Empyrean's voice sounded. Seeing Yi Shiwen did not surprise him. He only felt extremely worried. The situation this time was indeed beyond his imagination. He had already imagined the worst situation and was already prepared before coming. But the truth was that this young half-step sovereign was even more terrifying than he had imagined. He was defeated in a casual move. It also made him understand that although it might only be a thin line, the difference was like heaven and earth. Although he had touched that realm, he had merely touched it. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen had already taken 1 step into it. Such a gap was like the difference between heaven and earth. If this was the Fortune God dynasty, he would not be afraid. The other party would be suppressed by the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. Furthermore, he could use the Creation Universe scroll. It was not like he did not have the strength to fight. However, here, he did not have the support and protection of the martial epic. He also did not have the protection of the creation universe scroll. This was why he suffered a great loss the moment he arrived. The Western Empyrean was severely injured and scattered. Moreover, he was chased by several Empyreans. His chances of escaping were not high. Now, he had to face the sneak attack of 3 experts. His chances of escaping were not high. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. If he and the Western Empyrean were destined to fall here, at the very least, he could not let the Eastern Empyrean die here. As a Middle Empyrean, he might not be very selfless, but he still had this awareness. Each of them represented a large group of people behind them, and it was definitely not just them. Therefore, it was not a good thing for Yi Shiwen to come at this time. If Yi Shiwen had come at the beginning, they might have been able to change things. However, now, whether it was him or Heaven Talisman Immortal, they were already an arrow at the end of its flight. Even if he appeared now, he could not bring them out of this predicament with his own strength. The most important thing was that Yi Shiwen couldn't deal with any one of the 3 great experts that he was facing. Perhaps Yi Shiwen was very strong now, but these 3 people were too strong. If he was at his peak, he naturally would not have to worry. Even if he was not a match for the 3 of them, he would have no problem protecting himself. He had traveled the world for so many years. He still had this bit of confidence. It was too difficult to kill him in the same realm. However, he had been severely injured before this. This forced him to use all his strength and burn his life source. Otherwise, he might not be able to hold on until Yi Shiwen arrived. In his heart, Yi Shiwen was only equivalent to the level of a peak Empyrean. He had killed 5 Supreme Masters, but that was only an ordinary peak Empyrean. Compared to existences at their level, there was still a huge difference. 1 was enough, let alone 3. Don't worry, I won't die. I have already rescued the Western Empyrean. Today, I specially came to rescue you. Yi Shiwen said loudly. Today I am here. Neither of you will die. You are overestimating yourself. The eyes of the magical ability Era's apex heavenly master who besieged the Middle Empyrean flashed with thick killing intent. He had heard what Yi Shiwen said just now. The person who went to kill the Western Empyrean was not someone else. It was the magical ability Era's heavenly master. Yi Shiwen said so, obviously, the magical ability Era's heavenly master had fallen in his hands. Even judging from the fact that none of the heavenly masters had returned, the possibility of them being completely annihilated was very high. His eyes flickered with a terrifying glint as he thought of this. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.